2 hours.
I need to make 5 minutes. Starch. This is Joe Fagan, Public Information Officer. Welcome to the Township Council meeting for January 31st, 2023. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to our Council President, Tammy Williams.
Good evening, West Orange. Welcome to our special meeting on January 31st, 2023. Madam Clerk.
This is to inform the general public that this meeting is being held in compliance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975. This notice was emailed to the Star Ledger and West Orange Chronicle on January 26, 2023. Councilwoman Castellino.
Present.
Councilwoman Geber Michael.
Present.
Councilman Rutherford. Councilwoman Scarpa.
Present.
Council President Williams.
Present.
Mayor McCartney.
Thank you. This evening, we have called a special meeting so that we can have a discussion on our cannabis ordinance, review the changes that we would like to implement, and finally receive some public comment from our residents via in-person and or in Zoom. So as we call this meeting to order officially, I would like to ask our legal counsel, Mark Moon, to give us a brief introduction on cannabis in West Orange.
Good evening, Council. So the history of the township's cannabis regulation sort of ties in directly with the history of the state's movements in this area as well. As many of you may be aware, in November of 2020, there was a public question that was issued regarding the legalization of marijuana, which passed in the state of New Jersey. Shortly thereafter, on February 22nd, 2021, Governor Murphy signed into law the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Enforcement Assistance and Marketplace Modernization Act in 2021. Now, what that ultimately did was essentially it decriminalized the use, consumption, the sale and purchasing of cannabis and cannabis products. Prior to that statute, it was only through the medicinal cannabis licensing could you purchase cannabis products and with a prescription from a medical doctor. So in light of the statute being adopted, the township went forward and basically had the decision to make. The way that the statute was framed was that municipalities were given essentially 8 months to decide whether they wanted to allow cannabis businesses in their municipalities or not. And the prior administration, through resolution crafted and submitted to the council, a resolution where essentially West Orange would opt in as one of the municipalities which would allow cannabis businesses. And so it was in July 13th, 2021, that the township adopted ordinance 2647-21, which was the initial bones of what is the current provisions governing cannabis in the township of West Orange. The way that the ordinance was set up was basically creating zoning requirements, where it could be located, and licensing requirements. So under the state statute, what it allowed, it gave a decent amount of control to municipalities that would opt in to allowing cannabis businesses, one of which is you can zone to restrict where cannabis businesses can be located. And they created what was called the default zoning standard, which basically only, which allowed cannabis businesses only in industrial zones. So if municipalities essentially did nothing, they would automatically opt in and they would be sort of pressed with those zoning requirements. So the township created zoning requirements as well as adopted a local licensing policy, which created a framework in which any applicant that wanted to operate a cannabis business would have to obtain a local license from the township of West Orange. Moving forward, there was the township has gone through and created the Cannabis Business Advisory Task Force, which was going to be comprised of members of various boards and commissions that within the township of West Orange, as well as residents from the community as well. And it was that board that started setting up the framework and how they would accept applications and how that process would go. Now, moving forward, there were a couple of, over the past year and a half, there have been some changes to the ordinance, which from the very beginning, we knew was going to be a process because we learn new things, as new issues arise, as changes need to be made, they're updated. So for example, the biggest, simplest thing was we basically, because cannabis has been decriminalized, it's basically treated no differently than cigarette smoking. So one of the ordinances expanded the scope of smoking prohibition. So for example, you can't smoke in a public park, you can't smoke in a public building. Now the definition of smoking now includes not only tobacco products, but cannabis products, and little changes like that have been made throughout the last year and a half. So the way the system works right now is essentially this. The West Orange set up a process by which we wanted cannabis businesses to come to the township first and come to the township last. So in order to apply for a state license from the Regulatory Commission, you need to obtain what's called a evidence of local support, which is basically a resolution from the governing body saying that you are in support of the application before the state. So that is an item that is a prerequisite. Applicants cannot get a full license until they have that. So the township created a process by which you would apply for something for that from the township council. And basically there was an evaluation, they put in as much information, we've required certain disclosures as to ownership, as to proposed locations, and there was the advisory committee would score and evaluate each proposal and make a recommendation to the township council. As many of you know who've been to many of these meetings, you've seen those resolutions would come before the council. The applicants would generally appear, make a presentation, address any questions, concerns that the council may have posed, and the council would vote yes or no to issue them the resolution of local support or not. After that, they were to go to the state. They apply to the state for a license, that they have their own process whatsoever, and then they come out with a state license. Under our code, under our system, they're required to come back to the town. They've got the okay from the state, but they have to come back to West Orange and file another application for a local license. The local license requires them to make a lot of the same disclosures because it's closer to when they're actually going to be opening. We want to know where they're going to be, what the building's going to look like, what the layouts are going to be, what are your protocols for security, all of these things that address any concerns that the township may have. And then through that process, once any sort of land use or zoning issues then need to be resolved. So after that process, they receive a local license, and only then, after they go through that process, can they operate. So essentially, there's a three-step process for any applicant. They have to go to they have to come to us first for resolution of local support. They got to go to the state to get a state license. Then they got to come back to us for a local license to operate, and only then can they open. Now, what complicated the process a little bit is also there's a thing called conditional licenses, where an applicant goes straight to the state without coming to us first. They can basically ask for what's called a conditional license before getting any evidence of local support, and basically apply to see if they're qualified to be a license holder. And they get what's called a conditional license. Now, that's not a full license. They can't operate, they can't open, they can't sell. What that does is basically says it gives them 90 days to get together all of the necessary items so that they can go back to the state for a full license. So what we've been seeing many applicants is that they come to us with a conditional license from the state, and they're trying to get the resolution of local support after. So then they basically process the same after that. They go back to the state, they get their full license, then they have to come back to us. So ultimately, that's the framework of what exists at this minute. And that's the way that the cannabis licensing is operating in West Orange. So if there's any specific questions, I can address them.
If you would like to share with the audience what we learned last night about the conditional licenses, and for my colleagues as well, is that just because you receive a conditional license, it's good anywhere in the state, not just from West Orange. So folks that have been coming here wanting to open up here, that doesn't mean they just have to apply here. They could apply anywhere. And that was something we did not learn till the other night.
So conditional license are not tied to a specific property. They're tied to an applicant. So because anyone can essentially apply for a conditional license. You don't have to have site control. You don't have to have a specific location. You don't need a resolution of local support from the municipality. You just get a sort of like a pre-approval from the state. But ultimately, the way our system is set up, we can say yes, we can say no, we can say no, thank you. So it really doesn't, a conditional license is not a requirement that we grant them anything. It's not even a full state license. So a lot of the applicants that come to us and say, well, I have a license, I have 90 days to get a resolution of local support. The governing body has never been under any obligation to grant them that resolution of local support. It's treated almost as it should be as if they were coming to us for the first time.
And so that I am transparent in making sure our audience and residents understand the premise of Councilwoman Castellino's question. We did anticipate originally when we discussed it last meeting to have an open public meeting with the CRC, educate us as a council. Unfortunately, the CRC will not do a public meeting. Remember, I clarified that they would not answer any questions from the public. Their sole purpose was to make sure they educated the electeds. With that, we found out that they would not come, and we had to meet with them individually. Individually meaning 2 of us at a time so that we would remain within our OPMA guidelines. We can't have a quorum when we meet discussing official business, and it's not in a public forum. So my colleagues 2 by 2 met with the CRC representative yesterday for at least 60 minutes each session. I think the first session went a little over the 1 hour planned program time, but we have been educated by the Regulatory Commission, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. We had a tremendous amount of questions that we needed to understand from the Regulatory Commission answered. And of course, now this presentation is focusing on how we are going to regulate cannabis in West Orange. So thank you, Mr. Moon. And if there are any other comments or questions from my council colleagues, now would be the time to ask those.
Mine are pertaining to the ordinance, so, I know you sent out us a copy.
I haven't read it.
Yep.
We'll get to that.
So we wanted to discuss where we were.
The way at 6 a.m. this morning, I emailed to all members of council what I think is the latest iteration based upon the input that Mr. Moon and I got on Friday, and then Mr. Moon got with the 4 council people yesterday. So there's not lots of changes, and I thought we'd just go, section by section and taking.
I haven't even seen it yet.
You haven't
Can
seen.
Can you speak into? the
Okay,
microphone?
speaking in the microphone.
Oh, yeah,
I emailed it this morning.
I haven't looked at. my
Yeah, no problem.
email
So we'll
yet.
go through it now.
Yeah, so
it's very
I have
simple.
not looked at it.
Take your
at all.
time.
But you've
Because-
just looked, you're putting, for the record, you just haven't looked at this version.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna go through it. Nothing
Okay.
is.
And
but
excuse me,
again, we'll
Mr.
explain it all and.
And Mr. Trank, so I had made comments during the day, so nothing's been updated. We could update that. We could make our comments, and if the support is there to.
Me. Sorry. I'm sorry? Oh, you guys talk. I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry,
I sent a few notes today.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I went to Mr. Moon. Did you get my email this morning?
That was regarding the
Well-
separate or the other ordinance.
No, about the percentage, like the one, why are we asking like 10%? We're supposed to ask 1% the LLC.
Oh, I didn't see that. Sorry, I didn't see.
So why don't we start with what we had here, and obviously you can appoint to any and all sections that just,
Yeah,
there's not that many changes that we've made, but obviously we'll do whatever the council wants, and then obviously we can talk about other things. I just want to make sure, before we finish tonight, we clearly explain what we've done here. So again, on page 1, everything is redlined. So one of the biggest things, and I believe it was Catherine Rutherford asked for, we clearly have in here the 200 feet, so we're going from 100 to 200 feet, and we have houses to worship.
I'm sorry. What are you saying, Councilwoman?
This is not red.
yeah, that's not red.
I don't
We
see a
we
red
didn't
line.
receive- We didn't receive.
So
I don't,
this is red, but not the
It's not
200
colored.
feet.
That's the one, you all got it. I gave it to you.
No, but
I have-
they were right. This, the part on the 100, 200 feet is not red line. I agree with that. The first redlining on yours is under 5-34.3. But I'm just pointing out the changes that we've made, and this is the same template that's been before this council literally since the beginning of January. So, so again, I'm just pointing out that under purpose, it makes clear that the purpose is, and we'll get to it, is to go from 100 to 200 feet. And it has the areas that we're excluding, and as you can see, there's 7 categories. So they're all there, and nothing is, that's not changing. But again, so again, there's nothing under this first section. All it says is it shall be unlawful for any individual or entity to distribute cannabis or cannabis products except for a licensed cannabis entity acting within the scope of a license issued by both the commission, so that's the CRC that you were referring to, Council President, and within the scope of this license. Okay, so that's all that says on page 1. Okay, so on page 2, and again, Council President, this is something we discussed at length with the mayor or whatnot. All we're doing on page 2, and again, Mr. Moon can assist us, we're just saying there's a cap of 7, okay? And 7 is within what the letters of support you've issued, plus, again, you recently revoked the license at the beginning of January on Pleasant Valley Way, but you did it without prejudice to that one group coming back if they get another location. So again, you're not bound to them. If somebody else comes in and you find it appropriate, and by the way, you control this. So if you decide at some point you want to go 8, you want to go 6, other than if somebody's already operating, you can make that modification. So one of the issues, and I'm going to let Mr. Moon address this because is the issue of micro versus non-micro. So again, what I understand was some of the sentiment of the council and the public was, let's just create a cap. So as we know, micros were carved out, but micros at some point can become non-micros. So the concept was, let's just have a cap, and whether they're micro or non-micro, that's for you to choose. But you want to address that anymore?
I think that's pretty
Okay.
transparent and clear.
Okay.
Yeah, we can move
So
on.
then.
Well, wait,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
wait, we're moving on.
No, let's.
Are you doing an overall cap or we're gonna break down
down
what?
I said overall, okay, if you look at page 2
Okay.
at the top, it's under 5.
Some of these I want edited. I'm sure my
Yeah,
colleagues
Why
may
don't
as well.
when I finish explaining it, then
Okay,
you comment and say
Go through
whatever
each one.
you want or think, but let's keep it on.
that's,
we're on
that's
the cap.
okay. I just want to
You
make
go on
sure.
cap.
Okay.
So regarding the cap, what we agreed to initially was 4, and now I don't believe we've actually,
But as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 excluding micros, which could be unlimited.
No.
But that's what was in the order,
no, that was the original
Yeah.
understanding.
4.
The,
4 plus
Okay,
micros.
just so
Right.
that we can maintain
Yeah.
order, I'm gonna ask if, when you speak, let me call you, please, because you two are speaking at the same time. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just understanding.
Councilman Rutherford.
uh, when we went through this cap last year, I believe it was last year, maybe it was the year before. We agreed on 4. Micros were not included, and my understanding at that time was that the micros would, at some point in time, have a desire to become a standard license, and that would be included in that cap. Now, I know we voted for so far, I mean, I haven't voted for 7, but I think 7 have come before
Yes,
us.
7 have been approved minus the one that you revoked.
Yeah, I think I've approved, I think I voted for 4.
Well,
now.
let's go with
But-
what the council has approved, because whether you approved it or not, it has still been approved by this body. So
Well,
let's stick
what-
with what's been approved by the body as opposed to an
What
individual.
has been approved by the body is 4. What you're asking us to approve now is 7.
Yes, I'll yield to, and the clerk will find them, and Mr. Moon's been involved in every one. You've approved 7 minus the one you just revoked, for a total of 6.
No, what I'm saying is, we initially had a cap of 4 and 4 licenses. That's what we agreed on. And now we're agreeing to a cap of 7.
No, you agreed to a cap of 4 plus unlimited micros that are not in the cap.
Right. So now you're asking us to, whatever the understanding was prior. Now the cap is 7 cannabis businesses in town. That's what we're,
No more,
what
that's-
the ordinance says.
Right,
That's
this
where we- yeah.
ordinance says to be a combined total, no, which means no more than 7. The rationale for the 7 is because we want to not have unlimited micros. We don't want micros to just continue to come to us. So the rationale is we've issued 7 letters of support. We don't want more than 7 entities. And what we're also stipulating here is whether they are a cultivator or a retailer still no more than 7 licenses in the township of West Orange.
Right, and the problem, Councilman Rutherford, if you now say, I want to only go with 5, just assume, or 4, let's go to your number. Then that means you've already issued more than the.
Oh, what my understanding is, the letter of support does not guarantee anyone a license at all.
Correct.
It just allows them to move forward with the process. And my concern is that having 7 businesses in town, 12 square miles, since we've started talking about this, we've looked at other towns. There are towns that are larger than us that have 1. And what I've been confronted with is trying to explain to the public why 7 is an appropriate number in a town our size. And are we going to now be the, cannabis capital of Essex County with all of these cannabis operators in town? So the point of the matter is, we're going from 4 to 7 inclusive of micro businesses. And I'm concerned that may be too many.
So, and that's.
I agree.
The,
I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay, good. So that is a decision you should make if you're going to make immediately, because there are people spending money out there based on your letter of support. And so that's the thing I worry about.
Just 1 second, Mr. Moon. They're spending money based on their desire to operate in that space, not because they got a letter of support. They spent money prior to getting a letter of support.
But they are spending more money, as you can appreciate, going to boards, get site control, as you know, is important. So short, I'm not challenging anything you say. We're on the same page. I'm just saying, if you have 6 out there and you have a 7th placeholder, so if the decision of this council is to say, I just want the cap to be 4, then we should enact the ordinance ASAP.
I
So that-
completely agree.
I completely
And-
agree with that.
I
And-
completely agree with that.
And the council would need to take the step to start revoking resolutions of local support then.
Well, do we have to do that? Because don't they have to then come back
No,
to
no, no, no,
us
no.
for a final?
So the state commission has required that we cannot issue more resolutions of local support than licenses we have. We have-
So that was not explained to us. Have you heard that before?
We've already
I've not
done
heard
that.
Well, you have.
No,
Why?
No, we have to revoke. You already issued letters of support. You did.
Resolutions.
But why did we issue all those letters of support when we, our ordinance?
Because we issued, guys, one at a time, please.
Councilman Rutherford said it right. We had 4 plus unlimited micro.
Right.
That's why you ended up issuing 7.
Is unlimited micros in our ordinance?
Yes, it is. It is.
So again, it goes back to what Councilman Rutherford and I think are saying the same thing. If you want to cut it now, you've got to act. And then again, Mr. Moon is saying that means we will then, after you enact it, to restrict it to 4, we'll have to bring you back all 6 candidates, including the 7th, and you're going to have to decide whose letter of support you're revoking.
Well, how about this? I am not for 200 feet. All,
Wait, please.
Stay on this.
Wait, 1 second. We're talking about one thing. And we're gonna- But we're gonna talk about one thing and one thing only, and we're gonna have order. And we're not gonna just speak out, please. We have to maintain order. So right now, we're talking about the number of licenses that we want. If we want to change this number from 7 to 4, our legal department has advised us that we now have to review all of the letters of support and rescind to the number so that we don't give more letters of support than we are willing to allow licenses. That is the question that is right now on the
I have a
table.
question.
Yes.
If our ordinance is changed to say that we don't want any of these cannabis entities operating 1 mile from a school, then it becomes a moot point, because my constituents don't want this anywhere near a school. And they've all asked me to bring up 1 mile as an appropriate.
So when we
distance.
get to the distance,
So
we
if-
can talk about that. But
So it's-
right now, it doesn't matter. Right now, we're only focusing on the number of licenses. When we get lower in the ordinance, we'll talk about distance. But right now, we're discussing the number of licenses. And we've been advised what the process is going to be if we reduce this number to this less than the 7 letters of support that we've already issued. So with that being said, is there any further discussion on reducing the number lower than 7? We need to clarify that this evening. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Council President. So, you know, to sit up here, I know the public may think, that they're confused, they're going back and forth. It's been a really, really confusing process, and not anything that, we've done. Last night, I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with the gentleman from the state. But again, he didn't have the answers we were looking for. And this comes to the top from the state, the way this was rolled out and thrown in our laps. And we were under the impression in the beginning of this process that, you gave out letters of support because no way West Orange was going to get approved for all these licenses. And lo and behold, we are. And when we spoke to the gentleman from the state last night, and full disclosure is myself and Councilwoman Scarpa on the call, peppering him with multiple questions, and and Mr. Moon was there. And I want to thank Mr. Moon because he's been through the whole process and he's been so patient, and it's been so frustrating. He's been trying to advise us legally for so long, and the chief and the administration and everyone else, but it's really tough because it's important that we get this right. And I felt squeezed the past year, 2 years, because it's, we're told that they only get 90 days, conditional license, 90 days, we got to make decisions. And lo and behold, that license didn't have to be here. It could have been anywhere, any other town, didn't have to come here to West Orange. So there was a lot of, misconceptions, and not that anyone purposely mislead, but I just think this whole thing has been just a nightmare for myself personally. And I hope we end it tonight and we make our final decisions, whatever they may be. That being said, in regards to the number, it's been like following the bouncing ball. I know when naive I was first, with the micro businesses, I didn't, and I questioned, how could it be unlimited? Never thought we had that control of it. That was what a micro business was, and that was coming from the state side of it. My fault, my error. Here we are tonight, and, we have to revoke, I know there's 6 approvals out there, so obviously 6 would be the magic number if the attorneys are advising us for that right now. I think that's too many. A few of them haven't gotten their licenses yet. Where that puts us legally, I don't know. But I never wanted to go above 4 out of the gate.
So Councilmember, are you suggesting that we stay with 4? Is that your recommendation?
I in my heart, yes. In my head, because I know how this goes, and then we have to be advised by legal to a certain extent. Also, just a question about the process, Council President. Why isn't the public speaking first with their comments so we could hear what they have to say? So
We've heard the
continue?
public for over 18 months.
No, we
we
haven't.
haven't.
No,
No,
public
And it's
has.
on the agenda.
This was a consultation with the law department, and the public will be heard tonight.
They
So
will.
The point was.
Before we vote or after we vote?
We're not voting on anything tonight.
Okay.
We're not voting on anything tonight.
Okay.
To answer your questions, hopefully, everybody learned.
Okay,
From the interaction, before the meeting adjourns, the council president will give everyone the time to speak. And nothing, because what the goal here tonight is, as you go through, kind of like in budget session, maybe you'll come to consensus on this issue, hopefully, or whatnot. So we'll have direct orders as to how to revise this, to put on for first reading the next meeting. And so we want your input, the consensus as to what's going to get 3 votes, right, or more. And then, again, you're not voting the next week. There's no votes tonight that will bound this town at all. But
Absolutely.
We want, I
Okay.
don't want to keep preparing drafts, you keep voting them down.
no,
So that's the goal. You tell us what to do, we'll do it, and next week you'll have it on for first reading.
So is it 4? Is 4 your number that you're comfortable with? And if that's the number you're suggesting, then I'd like to hear feedback from my council colleagues as well. And again, we've already been advised as to the process. If we're going to reduce down to 4, then we're going to have to rescind 2 of the letters of support that we've already given. And so I'm sorry.
I'm for 4.
Okay, Councilman?
Well, so I'm not sure what the right number is. In picking up from what my council colleague, Councilwoman Castellino said a moment ago.
Water?
So Not only were we told that they would not all get licenses, I mean, because it didn't seem reasonable that everyone that applied would get approved. But, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we were told that we could not limit micros
Yes, we were told that.
when we
Earlier.
first considered it
No.
last year.
I don't, that may have been, I don't think that was, I didn't take that as accurate. I always was under the impression that there was a desire not to limit micros, but I was not under the
No.
impression that it was.
Yeah, I
Yes,
was,
Chief?
Chief, can
Chief,
you
if
use
could
the
please use the
microphone?
microphone? Thank you.
So I just want to point out one thing that I think maybe we're losing sight of is that two of these candidates are cultivation. So you really still only have four, and there's the one that's in limbo, so possible five. So if you're thinking about retail spots and you only want 4 retail spots in town, that's really what you have. Because the cultivation is going to be like locked away in an industrial area. It's not open to the public. It's really not visible. You got 4 retail spots, maybe a 5th. That's going to be up to the governing body.
Thank you.
so I understand that, and I think that is cutting to the chase, right? Because the issue is the traffic, all of what a retail establishment involves. And so we should be focused on that. I know there's some concern about labs, there's concern about some other licenses in town, but 4 dispensaries to me seems like quite a bit. And I think we should have that conversation about what the right number is and how we get there.
Councilwoman Gabor
I
Michael.
respectfully disagree. With the 7, we issued the 7 letters of support. To now go to those businesses in town that we're going to revoke them because it's 4 is wrong. This makes sense to me because before I was not in agreement with having unlimited micro, because that means if we do have the 2 cultivators, we could have 10, 15, 20 unlimited micro, and that's not okay. So we need to limit them. And we're doing it, I think, effectively by having the 7 as a number for any kind of license. And so I think we should go through with the process with the 7 that we have. Well, the one that's in limbo. And again, we already discussed that. That wasn't their fault. They were given a letter of support and then it was rescinded. And it's not fair to these businesses. And I know that when we make decisions, we have to do the right thing for the overall. And it's not fair what's happening to these businesses. I feel like, we're going back and forth now. And I just disagree.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moon.
The other thing that the council should keep in mind is that I believe only one of the entities with a resolution of local support has a full license from the state, only one. So there is still, the other 5 or 6, however you want to count it, they may have conditional licenses, but they're still in the process with the state. Now, that being said, if some of them end up not getting a license from the state or falling away, council can always come back, revisit that number. So, that's another point that that the council should keep in mind.
Thank you. All right, so we've had conversation about reducing the number to 4. We have one colleague who is not comfortable with that reduction. Is there any more discussion about this number? Because we need to make a decision about how many licenses we're going to allow, or it's going to continue to read unlimited
I have a
micros.
Question, if
Certainly.
if it ends up being that the number is reduced, then what happens with the micros? Does that include micros or is that
Yes.
micros still gonna be?
Right now, that includes micros.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to add one point the gentleman from the state did make last night in regards to us issuing the letters of support. That, again, although we issued the letters, there's still not the final say, as we've been saying, so we're not under any
He said
obligation.
no obligation.
Right, but if we're going to reduce our number, there is no obligation to allow the 7. But if we are going to reduce our number less than 7, we have to rescind some letters of support.
I have just a comment. I remember talking about this with Mr. Kaiser the last time we were here, and I believe he said something like, these businesses, they know they're going into a business that's very risky. They have their own legal counsel and they are operating at their own risk. So
but
what
that's obvious.
obligation do we really have?
No, but that's true, but we have an obligation as government to cut square corners.
Mhm.
And so to give them adequate notice. So
Mhm.
I think we're all saying the same thing. If you determine to pick a cap less than 7 or 6 that are issued, the law department will immediately bring you back all 6. And you will have to decide which 2 letters or whatever the number is. That you want to revoke the letter of support, and you will have to make that decision on whatever, on the merits, and you will.
I'm
Okay,
comfortable with that.
But that's, so the first thing is, what's the cap? So that we can, because if we're gonna go below the 6 or 7 that are now out there, we need to do this process.
All right,
Yeah, I
I'm
just
not,
wanna-
I'm not comfortable reducing past the letters of support that we've already issued. I don't think that's fair to the businesses that we have come in. So I'm very comfortable with the 7 with letters of support. We've already agreed and voted upon the fact that the last entity has the opportunity to cure. So, you know.
Just, Council President,
Mhm.
just wanted to state for the record, if, we're talking about this as if the statute is currently 7. The statute is not currently 7.
No, it's 4.
The statute is 4, so we're not reducing it to less than 7. We're raising it above
Exactly.
4.
But we're
Exactly,
creating
that's my
a
point.
cap, As
There's a cap.
Councilman Michael said.
For
that will
total.
Include the micros.
It's not
Yes.
unlimited micro right now, so that means without the moratorium in place, there could be hundreds and thousands of applications for micro businesses. By having the cap at 7, that includes all businesses, all licenses, whether it's micro, whether it's a cultivator, all businesses.
Perfectly understood. I think, I'm not in support of 7. I know that we have 2 cultivators in our mix.
Mhm.
And I think all the rest are dispensaries, right? Aren't all the rest
Yes.
dispensaries?
Mhm.
So that means there are 4 plus 1 that may reapply.
So that would be 5 dispensaries.
that would be 5 dispensaries in town.
Great.
So
One other
And I
question that
just-
I had, Councilman, and to the legal team as well, is even though we have given out the 5 letters of support, once we have the licensing process or application process available, do we have to grant those licenses immediately? Can we do a staggered process? How is that gonna work?
One has now finished the whole planning process and is ready
To open.
finalize. They've had the security plan reviewed confidentially and from the chief, so they're ready to come back. They will be coming back in the very near future. So I guess when you say in a staggered basis, clearly the purpose of any business is spend money, open and operate in accordance with law. So to just say, you can't be arbitrary or capricious. So you can't just say, I'm only gonna consider it for 1 month. As soon as they have their application together, we'll present it to you and you'll decide.
Okay, that answers my question. So it would be arbitrary and capricious if we were to say, not yet. Okay.
I have one other nugget to share with the conversation I had with Mr. Moon last night. So again, not all of them have been approved. Although the gentleman from the state seems to think, it's just a matter of time before they all are. But in case they're not, and they're not approved, you could always immediately reduce and do another amendment to the ordinance to reduce it
Mhm.
down.
Mhm.
However, you keep saying 7, when I know you want to give this other entity another shot. I did not agree with that, so I would never go to 7. I think that entity did not have the lease.
Okay, so let's stay focused again. I said this to Councilman Rutherford. I want to say the same thing. Let's deliberate and discuss what the body has approved, not you as an independent person, because we are a body. We're a governing body.
Mhm.
So let's only deal with what
But
this
just-
body has
But just to
approved.
follow up that, so go with 6. Then they can't come back because they don't have anything before you revoked it. And then all you did in that resolution was amended to say it was without prejudice to their right to reapply if they got a site. So now you're not gonna approve the 7, so that would mean 6. So it's totally, whatever you're doing, I'm saying, make a decision, whatever number you wanna go with.
I disagree with that. That's wrong. We gave them an
No, I respect
opportunity.
what you're saying, but they haven't found the site. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's totally the province of you, but
I know you're wrong, but I have to add this because after, again, that's why I wish the state was here so everyone could hear. And is that recorded, by the way? Do we have recorded copy of our conversation
No,
from the
I
state?
recorded our meeting.
Right.
It was,
Thursday.
ours, so I like that copy. Because,
we didn't record it. So if the state did, we don't.
no, our Zoom
Zoom meeting.
recorded, it was the town Zoom, it should be recorded.
Okay, but
I thought it was.
The whole point, Mr.
It's
Trank,
not
is it's been
feedback.
frustrating because the information that's out there. And again, I feel bad, Councilwoman, you know, you thought it was a good thing, like for me to hear this. And I used to tell Councilwoman Matu Brown this all the time. Stop sending me to talk to people because the more I hear about this, the worse it gets. Where, you know, I'm trying to be, you know, this is the, like you said, the governing body approved it. I'm trying to be very, very vanilla here with not having, you know, my own personal preferences interjected because I have to do my job. I've been like that for 20 years. I was on the school board in here. And I have to tell you, the more I ask the questions and the lack of the answers, that not to the gentleman's fault, but to the state's fault, is alarming. And it may, you know, it makes me nervous of what we are doing here. And we are there. I've been reading articles and God bless the constituents. Now, every once in a while that people work for 18 months, they were dealing with the pandemic. We passed this when in the middle of the pandemic or the beginning of the pandemic, when parents were worried about how their kids were going to get educated. Then they were worried about that they had to wear masks. And then-
Councilwoman,
and
I'm gonna ask you to
I
be,
know
please,
you're gonna ask me, but you
please.
have to understand.
I do, but
This
you
is
have to
very
understand our role,
frustrating.
but being
I
frustrated is
think I
not.
do. I do understand my role. That's why
Okay, so let's
I
stay
want you guys
germane to the topic and right now.
understand your
if
role. We have to
it's-
protect the public. Our number one is safety and to protect the public.
We're doing that. We're going
Okay.
through what is
Okay, so
thank you.
do we have a consensus on the number? So that I know what to put in this. I mean, you're not voting tonight, but I just want some direction. So we have
I'm-
four here, and we have seven.
I'm going with 4.
Okay, Mr. Rutherford.
2 4s, 1 7.
Councilman.
Yeah, you know, I'm willing to split the baby, you know. And, you know, this is still a recorded session, so let's be very clear. We are still before the public. This is gonna be
Mhm.
memorialized permanently. So we do owe the public an explanation.
Yes. we do.
The context for
Councilman.
my consideration.
Councilman, see your mic. Thank
The
you.
context for my consideration is, you know, after looking at what other towns have done, looking at the size of West Orange, listening to residents who are rightfully concerned about where we're placing these businesses and how many we have. You know, while we are elected to lead, we also are representative of those that have put us in this place. So it's not for us to tell them what's right for them when they are clear about what it is they want. At least to me, I've not heard the other side. I've not had a single person say, hey, we need more. We need more cannabis businesses in town. I've not had one person tell me that. So I am concerned about the number. And that is what gives me pause. And my concern is primarily or almost exclusively with regard to dispensaries. I don't think you have the same issues with regard to cultivators. If we don't allow consumption lounges, if that was in the mix, I'd have a problem with that too. But, you know, so, you know, I'm willing to split the baby, so to speak, and do 5. That would allow us 3 dispensaries and 2 cultivators. But I am not willing to do 5 dispensaries. I'm hesitant to do 4.
Okay, so we've heard 2 4s and we've heard 2 7s and we have 1 person saying 5. We need 3 votes in order to amend the ordinance.
Well, if the choice is 4 or 7, I'm going with 4.
Okay,
So-
thank you. Thank you very much. Can we go on more?
Okay, so the next section, it's really, I'll call it procedural under 5-34.5. All we're doing here is, I think the experience on Pleasant Valley Way led us to say, kind of like a land use application, we should say to the applicant before they come before you for a license or for a letter of support, that they're gonna serve all these agencies. And they'll have to file certification with Ms. Carnival that basically certifies that they've given a complete copy to the Board of Ed, to the zoning officer, to the health department, to the fire chief, to the SID. And so that's all this does in this section, in letter A. That's what the redlining says. So hopefully.
Are there any questions regarding these changes?
So now we flip over to page 3 and 4B as in boy, and you'll see the redlining again. As you know, we've had issues in the past, so we're looking to tighten this up so that if somebody says they have a lease for XYZ property, we want them, we want the owner of the property. And this is similar to land use. The mayor will obviously knows about this. If you're gonna rent property from someone, you have to have them sign the application so that, we know you have site control. So all that letter B on paragraph 4 says is that the lease agreement or agreement of sale must be executed by the owner of the property where the applicant intends to operate the licensed cannabis entity. So we're not, in my opinion, spinning our wheels and considering stuff that may or may not happen. And then the last sentence of B dealt with that issue, which many of you are aware of, where if for some reason, like sometimes a property owner will give you an option. They'll say, okay, council president, I'll give you an option to lease this property. I'll hold it. You'll pay me a small fee. I'll give you an option. But sometimes somebody else walks along
Yeah.
and offers more money or whatnot. So you no longer have site control. So what this provides is that no property owner can execute a lease agreement or agreement of sale for more than one entity at a time. And if it decides that yours expired and now they're gonna go with Councilwoman Scarpa's, we get notification, so we know that. Because that, as you know, will affect all the time we spend on this. So again, that's mainly just.
How are we communicating that to landlords?
Well, again, the best way to do it, I would recommend is that when somebody comes with an application, we, in prepping it for you, will contact, make sure it's a real document. And at that point, we would say, and first of all, the 4 corners of the document hopefully say, if it's an option, like in my example, Councilman Rutherford, presumably you'll say you have an option for 6 months, which is not unusual or whatever. But again, we can communicate with the landlord and say to the landlord, hey, if the situation changes for any reason, you gotta tell us, because we're spending a lot of time and effort. So again, to me, that's one of the questions you would naturally just say, we want to confirm that that's tied up and still exists before it comes to you. So we'll take care of all that.
Any questions regarding that change? All right, thank you.
And then on page 4, we get to the issue of ownership. And I think Councilman Castellino suggested this and Mr. Moon added this. 5-34.6. We want it clear. And again, a lot of what we're doing, keep in mind, liquor establishments are among the most regulated industries for good reason in the state. And this is kind of an offshoot. So the key here is if there's going to be any change of ownership, even if it's a father, sometimes for estate planning, they sometimes put in a child's name or a spouse, it all has to come back. Nothing gets done on an ownership of any sort without it coming before you. And then I think what Mr. Moon clarified is it goes up the ladder. But as you know, sometimes a holding company, sometimes some of that's been a kind of a weird confluence, which is not unusual from a liability standpoint or a corporate standpoint, but you want to know who the licensee is. So
Those of you looking at the colored version, I think there's like a couple of words missing on that line, just to clarify.
what line?
See,
Yeah, see, any change in ownership subject to disclosure under section, chapter 5, subsection 34.5B1 of the township of the West Orange Municipal Code shall be subject to approval by the township.
It's in this, son.
No, but the color version, I just handed it.
Okay, but this one, I thought, okay, but again, that's the goal. And then,
Wait, Mr. Trent, I have a question on that. So say there's an entity that we approve.
Yes.
And then they have to get renewed, they make a change.
Yes.
For whatever reason.
anything,
They have a partner, one partner leaves, one buys
How many
in.
dies? Could happen.
They have to notify us. This
They have
is,
to come back. The license is not valid
okay.
in anybody else's name other than people.
But
that-
when you have an LLC and they change membership,
Same thing.
Okay. This subsection 34.51B, if you turn the page back,
yeah.
that's the page two.
But you had 10%. Where,
Right.
where did it say 10%? Because that
That's
should be
bottom
down.
of page two. On page two, that's.
Oh, there it is. I had another copy. There's so many copies of this. It should be 1% because the entities,
Okay, I'm sorry.
operating
Any
agreements,
change, even one,
yes,
even one,
yes.
doesn't matter, even a fraction of percent, has to come back.
So we're gonna take the 10% out and it's gonna be any change?
Any
So let me, that's more broad. We want to change right now, when they apply, they have to disclose any owner that has 10% or more. If we're taking that 10 and turning it to 1, that's changing
But
both.
that's false.
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
We're gonna make
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
our goal, and it shouldn't be one, it should say any change, that way, even if it's
No,
fractional.
I'm not talking about, no.
But that
We won't do that.
contradicts what we've been doing and what's in the application, because that was a change I made when this whole thing commenced and everybody agreed to it. That they have been submitting their operating agreements and in
Right, right.
operating agreements, it goes down to 1%. And I've seen
We-
the OAs that they submitted and some of them have 1% partners or
Right.
2% partners. So,
The goal is any change,
yeah.
okay, so we need to tighten up the section before.
So to leave it at 10 is.
Okay, we're
wrong.
we're not, any change.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
please,
I
listen,
have a
listen,
question.
listen. I hope this is the last night that
We
we,
do.
because
We
this is
all
why the
do.
meetings have been going to midnight. And then I had to change my plans last night for 2 hours or more because, and God bless Mr. Mooney, had me on another hour after that. So I know you're, I know, but we're taking the time tonight. I don't care if we're here to 2 o'clock in the
That's
morning.
right.
We need to get this done. And I'm going to ask every question,
And I
because this
have
is
questions
why
too.
we are here
You're
again.
absolutely correct.
So I
We don't need
apologize.
to rush.
I apologize, but this is a workshop and a
That's right.
workshop where I should have the time.
Take
As much time as you'd like.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Yeah, we understand your
Yeah.
goal, and we respect it, and we can change.
Yeah.
Any ownership interest down to a fraction should be disclosed to you.
thank you.
Yeah, that's a question I've had for a while. I believe there should be full disclosure. Every board member, every stockholder, down to the very 1% financial interest needs to be disclosed.
Got it. Right, and that's what happens with, we get liquor license and whatnot, follow the money, so we will make those.
Follow the
changes.
money,
Right.
exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you,
Doable.
thank
Council
you.
President, if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
So this conversation arose out of some questioning we had regarding one of the applicants who had multiple levels of LLC. So for the benefit of the public,
Yeah,
if an LLC has members that are LLCs, and then that LLC has members that are LLCs, we will be disclosed until we get to a natural person. I know I saw it in here. But so for folks that are wondering, there's no way to hide your ownership unless you have a straw owner. There's no, I mean, you can commit a crime, right? But there's no way to hide a legitimate natural person owning a cannabis business in town because we will go all the way through the LLCs until we get to the actual people.
Got it.
Is that's correct, right? Okay.
No problem. And again, like, to go to your point, which is an excellent point, if we find somebody lied, then it's automatic.
It's
revocation of
automatic
license.
revocation.
Besides probably
Okay,
being
good.
some other thing that police chief will have to deal with, but from your point of view, the license will be revoked.
So the reason I tied it to that section is because it includes all levels up. So that's why I said it just refers back to that section.
And generally, what you ask for is a org chart, so you can see that, the level.
Yeah.
Okay, so that takes us to letter B, and that's.
Just a quick question on that. It says, it's so they have to advise us, they have to disclose changes in ownership. What period of time do they have to do that?
Before, they can't change ownership unless you approve it. It's like a liquor.
I'm not clear
I
that
didn't see that.
that's in here.
That's why I said the words and subject to approval by the.
yeah.
Oh, and subject to approval. Okay, got you,
The
Gotcha.
color copy for some reason isn't.
got you.
And then letter D is just, and this is consistent with liquor licenses, that 60 days before the renewal, they have to come back before you. That is what is required. All licensed cannabis entities shall submit their application for renewal no later than 60 days before the expiration of the license. And
Okay.
licenses are 1 year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So that takes us to letter F on page 5. And so, as you know, parking is frequently determined by the zoning regulator or as a part of the planning process. And I think that the concern that we heard articulated, especially with regard to retail locations, that there should be, and I think that was one of the reasons the council reconsidered Pleasant Valley Way, is that there should be some off-street parking for these businesses. So all F is saying is, notwithstanding anything else, the planning board still does their job, and depending on what zone it is and whatnot, but this is providing that any licensed cannabis retail or medical dispensary shall have no less than 1 space for every 250 square feet of space being utilized by that business.
So can you put that in human terms so that we understand it? So if you have 1,000 square foot
So four
of
spaces.
business, you need 4 spaces. And so we know with micro businesses, they can't be more than 10,000 square feet. So that means they need
2,100,
2,500 square feet. What did I say?
10,000.
Oh, okay, thank you. 2,500 square feet. So that means that they're going to
And-
need 10 spaces. And do all of our current letters of support entities who we've issued have letters of support? Do those locations have 10 spaces?
I don't know, off the top of my head, so
I
I
think
won't guess
most of
that.
them.
But again,
did.
I would think Park Avenue does, which I know is
Yeah.
some, but
Prospect does, South Valley does,
South Valley does, you're right.
Yeah. Central Avenue did.
Central Avenue, the Paragon.
oh, yeah.
As 10 spaces?
That's it, that's the 4. Well,
And,
No.
and I just want to add to
Yeah.
this conversation because
Can
what
we-
we learned about needing the spaces is because also with the loading and the, the security procedures with the deliveries as well. So they-
Right, so can the administration verify, please, that all of the locations that we have will meet this criteria? Thank you.
I do also want to mention so the reason why you're gonna see another section that also has parking requirements. So one is in the licensing section, one is in the zoning section. So as you may know, zoning requirements are subject to variances. So an applicant comes in, they can ask for a variance, they get accepted from it. But by putting in the licensing section, they still have to comply with it. It's not
Okay,
something you
good.
get.
And that's why I want to make sure they all comply before we implement this change.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us down to the bottom of page 5 and.
can I just add, what was the calculus for the 250 square feet? Where did that, is that standard for retail or where did that come from?
I think.
Is
came
that
from
best
retail.
practices in cannabis or?
No,
There's-
Yeah, there's no best.
There's no best practice.
We pulled that out and you said,
No, but it's certainly not more aggressive. It's recognizing
Yeah,
that you don't want people backed up on the street, jumping out of the car and
Yeah.
creating issues. And I think that's where the Pleasant Valley Way struck us all in the face that, wow, there's no parking there.
Did-
So that,
Did you look to see what other towns are doing that?
well, the problem, it's an excellent question.
Like I know Bloomfield, for an example, has total of 7 licenses.
But take Montclair, where we know Ascend is right
Yeah.
at Bloomfield Avenue.
Mhm.
Parking is horrendous in Montclair on
Yeah.
a kind of good day, so, but they don't have any issues. Apparently, the chief checked with the chief there, the chief can comment on that. They have not had parking and congestion issues. There's an initial, and the chief, I'd rather the chief speak to it, there's an initial interest in any of these businesses.
I only asked about Bloomfield, so I know they're similar in size to us. They have 53,000
Right.
residents,
call
while we're
her,
about
please.
50,000,
Call
so.
We can check.
Yeah.
I don't know if chief already knows, but we can certainly
They have
check with
bit-
Bloomfield
Yeah.
and report to you if they have any minimum parking. And we'll report to you when it's here on first reading.
Thank
So
you.
We'll just both those issues.
Thank you, Councilwoman
Yeah, I
Scarpa.
had some experience with this. I actually visited the Montclair.
You're gonna personally tell us about your.
And we parked, there's a big parking garage right
Where?
behind it, right behind the
In Montclair?
Ascent. Yeah, in Montclair. So
First Street?
it's around the corner, right, on that side street. So there's a big parking garage that houses people.
Right,
And that's probably why they didn't have a problem.
great, well, it's good, people are finding parking and being safe, so that's all you care about. Okay, so So that takes us to the bottom of page 5, 25-24.2. And it says, no licensed cannabis entity shall be located within 200 feet from the property line of any property in the house of worship as defined in our existing code.
Number 2, Mr. Trent, 200 feet of any school building.
School is going from 100 to 200 in the subsection 2 of my law. And it's not just, it won't just be West Orange Public School, it would be
Any school.
private parochial school.
And we have done a overlay map to guarantee that none of the entities that we've already approved.
Yeah, Mr. Gragel provided that.
Yeah, they're all fine.
No, I'm just saying for the benefit of the public, we have already confirmed that that is the case and
I
doesn't
have a-
impact
I
anyone.
have a comment on that.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to see it a mile from schools. I think 200 feet is nothing. The one up on Pleasant Valley Way that everyone thought was too close to both of the schools was 450 feet. So I think they should be much further from schools.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Any other comments that from my council colleagues? Councilwoman Castellino?
Yeah, so originally I had wanted as far away as possible, obviously. And we came up with the 200 number on, when I was on the task force, because again, to me, this would have been so simple if we just mirrored the ABC laws, because every time you go to speak about negative impacts with cannabis, especially the gentleman from the state last night will throw you, going after liquor stores, which I don't see all the comparisons. However, but when you want to, make the laws the same, they don't do that either. So we can't follow the liquor laws. We have to do it on our own and make up our own rules. So that's part of my own personal frustration with this. And we said we keep it out of Pleasantdale Center. So originally I was comfortable with the 200 until the night that, it was on the agenda to pass on Pleasant Valley Way. And so now I'm concerned that my colleagues would have that approval, even though it was rescinded. I like to hear from administration how far Pleasantdale Center is, and I'm willing not go a mile. I know it's not a mile, but willing to make it go out to Pleasantdale Center. So, this never happens again until you get a new council to vote it out. But-
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
So my question is, I'm not for the mile, but I'm disappointed that this was entertained to be in Pleasantdale Center last month, even though it was rescinded, but it was still there, and I want to prevent it from having the
So you can do
opportunity.
that by, first of all.
So is that
there-
500 feet? Is that
It's about
800 feet?
500, I think.
But so, council, can you spot prevent an entity?
No.
based-
No.
So,
Specifically for that one specific.
right, so when she's talking about restricting it from Pleasantdale Center, that's not something legally.
Well, what she's suggesting is, yeah,
If whatever distance that is,
right, make that universal around town.
Universal around town.
that's what she's.
That's what I'm.
So that
So
poses a
that- yeah,
challenge with the map.
That's a challenge to the map because we already know that the Park Street, that doesn't meet the requirements on the map overlay. So
Park
if we,
Are we able to,
Park-
But here's what, again,
yes,
When-
please.
again, you're allowed to say in a zone that is type of business is not permitted. We have zoning districts.
Right, but to extend it to
Like, we
four
have-
hundred and fifty,
Yeah, I
we
wouldn't do
already
that
know,
because it's
right, we've already
every-
seen the map.
But I thought what I heard Councilwoman saying was, she just thinks because of the proximity of Pleasantdale to the high
Yes.
school, it would be better
We just
off.
don't approve a location there when it
well,
comes.
we all thought that's what we were going to do, but that didn't
That
happen
doesn't
last
appear to
month.
happen, though.
But again, so yes, obviously you can reject anything. But if you want to say and put the world on notice that cannabis business was not going to be permitted in, we'll call it Pleasantdale, we'll have to define that, but it is, we all know what it means. Then we can make a zone that it's not a permitted use in that zone.
Will we have to make that a new zone, or, because if you restrict it from that zone, wouldn't it be restricted in all similar zones? Like if that's a,
I get. look at-
We restricted off of,
Right.
in downtown Alliance and.
That's a special improvement district, though.
I want to talk to Ms. Ryman. I understand your.
Okay.
I have a question. I have a question. Can I?
Yes, Councilwoman.
Okay, so my understanding is that two of the locations that we've approved already are very nicely placed. We have the one on.
What does that mean?
We have the one on Prospect, and they're not near any schools or any sidewalks where our children walk. They were thoughtful and they were very nicely placed. There's the one on Prospect and there's the one down on Central Avenue. And then we have the grower. I don't want to, I work at Washington School and I don't want to see my children who walk to
We
school
already took care of
have
that.
to walk to it. And I don't want it a mile. I want it a mile away from
Okay.
Washington School
We-
and Edison.
We've,
School.
we've
It's not
heard,
just
we've
Pleasant.
heard you on that, and it can't be specifically distanced from a particular school. Our capacity is to make it consistent across the board. So we've
It
heard,
could be a mile from any school.
so we've heard Councilwoman
That's what I'm
Castellino's
I'm
recommendation.
advocating a mile from
Okay,
any school.
I heard you. We all heard you. And we've also made it very clear that we are 12 square miles in this community. And that does not meet the requirements that we have already issued for letters of support. That will not meet those
Yeah.
standards. So we cannot
well,
do a
even if it
mile.
did, Council President, having it, so I hear you. We can have some offline conversation
Mm-hmm.
about that. But I think the challenge with that, when you look at the spaces where it would be allowed,
Mm-hmm.
if we did a mile from every school, there'd probably be, 50, 100 different places that would even be eligible.
Well, we don't
Like
need that
exact-
many because we have two very nicely placed ones already for retail space and we have a grower.
But the point is that,
So I don't understand where the problem is.
so the problem is there's probably not enough
Real estate.
inventory in town if we did a mile. Because some of those properties, if not all of them, are gonna be
Go find
occupied.
one. I
All
don't,
So
that is
you
the
can make the
problem.
request. I think,
That's what I-
can you get Mr. Greigel to draw, is that like a heavy lift
We have the.
with a mile on it?
No,
Not with a
we-
mile.
well,
I haven't seen
Yeah,
it.
we
Yeah, that
only,
was-
we'll have to
that was
get him
the
to
one.
do that.
We don't have one with a mile.
No,
can
we
get that.
don't.
Yeah,
I'd like to see a mile.
send-
That, yeah.
just so that Councilwoman Scarpa can see what would be eligible.
So a mile.
Well,
from school.
before we do a
From-
mile, do we have enough support for a mile? Because we don't want the administration doing things that's not gonna be supported. So if we don't, if we don't have support to extend this to a mile, then I'm not gonna ask the administration to do a map of a mile. We know that if we extend it to a mile, we will exclude some of the letters of support
Yeah.
that we have already
Well,
issued.
we
We
have two
understand
are-
that you don't have
that
a
are very
problem with
good,
it.
that are
One
property
moment,
owners.
please, one moment. We understand and we're clear that you don't have a problem with it. Our task this evening is if you don't have a problem with it and you have two additional supportive votes, then we will entertain it. And right now, around this table, we don't have enough votes to extend the distance to 1 mile.
Well, why don't we
We've
just
heard
look
you
at it?
on the record. We've heard you, but we don't have the votes. So can we please continue?
Okay, so that takes us to, again, I think it kind of basically just takes us to the end. The only thing I think we just added in number 7 was just that any signs will be in accordance with our codes. So nothing else there. I think it's clean. I think it's just clean up. Those are basically the substance of the ordinance.
Do we have any questions regarding the changes to the ordinance?
Now, I do have, I'm not sure if this could be included or if this is under a different ordinance. This ordinance is just for the entities, correct? So this wouldn't be in regards to usage of spaces. Like in regards to what we were discussing last night with like event spaces, like where,
Are we talking about just general smoking prohibition?
yeah. That would go into the smoking ordinance,
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
There's a specific smoking ordinance.
or for like for special events, like if we prohibit it from use in a public space during a special event, that would go under that would be under
Well, part of the problem is when you say, public, like the street, right?
no, like, for example, the street fair. So it's a special event.
Okay.
So that's usage at a special event where we don't allow smoking at
I
the
would have to
special
research
event.
specifics of what we can.
Okay.
Because it's a weird nebulous thing, because normally
Yeah.
it's a right of way, which is different than property. When you close for a special event, does it convert it to public property? So I have to look at that.
Okay.
What we,
I'm not
we,
saying-
we're, the administration is going to be proposing a, public events or permit process. And certainly we could include within that the granting of a permit to put in, certain restrictions. And we certainly could add that as a restriction. in
But
there.
nothing else here.
Okay. So I think, and I want to thank my council colleagues for taking the time this evening to come out and go through this ordinance in this work format session. I think it's clear that we all have mixed emotions regarding cannabis, the use of cannabis, and how we are going to accomplish this new business entity in our municipality. But thank you all for your time. I appreciate the fact that everyone did take an opportunity very quickly with short notice to listen to information from the CRC. And again, to come here on a special evening, special session for an evening this night to work through this. So at this time, I would like to invite the public, if you have any public comment, please be mindful that public comment should be less than 5 minutes. And if you will approach the podium, if you will indicate your name and address for the record. The gentleman in the back, please come forward. The gentleman in the back had his hand up first. I'll ask him to come forward. Thank you so much. Yes, please.
Dowd, Nutwell Avenue. Sorry, Michael Dowd, Nutwell Avenue, lifelong resident of the town. At first, I supported the legalization. I didn't want to see a 16-year-old kid get a criminal record, they were locking people up. Going forward, the other day, it's been legalized and some kid was rolling a joint in front of me in this public street, in the subway, actually. And they were smoking again. Okay, it's gone over the line here now. So I have 2 points. One, I want the least number of facilities and the most stringent controls, meaning it's not cigarettes, it's alcohol. I think the chief will say there's not an open container law. There's an open container law in the town. You can't open a bottle. You can't open alcohol, drink on the street corner. That's illegal. That's not correct. Well, then we should have that. You can't be drunk and disorderly, can you?
Well, can you
Can you be
just
drunk and
make
disorderly
your
on the
statement? Okay,
No,
just
So I think that's the bar, the minimum bar should be, it's like alcohol. You cannot be disorderly conduct. You can't smoke in front of people. And if these facilities are open and the police department gets 2 or 3 calls there, pull their license. That's my request. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adele. We appreciate your comments. I apologize that if you'll come forward for your public comment. Oh. You want me to go to someone else first? Thank you. Your name and address again for the record.
Rachel Hersey, 8 Mellon Avenue, West Orange. I want to actually kind of second what Mr. Rutherford was saying, in that the law is for right now. There was it was illegal, in my opinion, to give people approval. The law is for total. I don't know, I don't think you're facing lawsuits, but if you do revoke what you gave because you had no right to give it. All right, that's number one. And I feel adamant about that. This town council had, or whoever it was, had no right to give out 7 approvals when the current ordinance passed in 2021, August or July, specifically says 4 total of all categories. That's number 1. Number 2, on page 3, number 6, talks about micro businesses. In the last version, whoever did that had no problem writing, no micro businesses shall be allowed in town. That was in the last version, which did not go forward, obviously. I have that last version. I do not understand why we can't just write no micro businesses and not use the height of a cap and the threat of thousands of micro businesses when you can easily just write no micro businesses. And I think those actually agitated me, as you can see, those two items. Another thing is there's a little redlining here, but not much. I know that the last version I was looking at talked about licensed establishments versus entities. And so I don't think, is this the total of the original ordinance? I don't think it is. And in order to be able to read this and understand what's going on, I need to see a full ordinance. And for me to have to keep going back to all the different versions is unfair to put on the public citizens. And if you are changing something, which is an entire cannabis ordinance, I would appreciate redlining the whole thing for us in the public. Plus, I only got this today. And somehow one is supposed to understand all the nuances and the changes, and that's like impossible. The other thing I really want to talk about is this mileage. 200 feet is nothing. Someone said that going to the front of my house, and I live in an ordinary Pleasantdale house, is almost 50 feet. So what is 200 feet? I can't even believe you guys are contemplating that. I would like to also add that although cannabis is currently not criminal in West Orange and/or New Jersey as a whole, it is still a federal crime. It is not legal under federal law. Under federal law, there's a 1,000 feet drug-free zone from schools. I believe if you have 200 feet, you would be in violation of a federal law, which I don't support our West Orange County being in violation. I don't know whether you're going to have federal people in our town and decide, oh, there's I'm going to arrest that person because it is a violation of federal law. I understand we don't understand how enforcement's going to happen, that our local police are probably not going to get involved, but certainly the federal officers could. And it's also disgraceful why we would be more lenient on cannabis than the drug-free ordinance of our government. And 33 seconds, that I'm sure I didn't say half of what I would like to, but that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Hersey. We appreciate your comments and your feedback. Is there anyone else in the council chambers that would like to make public comment? Ms. Lefkowitz, you're looking around. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Your name and address for the record again, please.
Yeah, Paula Weinberg, Mount Pleasant Ave. Last time I was here, I thought, why am I giving my address? But I did last time, but Mount Pleasant Ave. Thank you for this opportunity for us to speak. One of the things I would like to say that I think maybe I want to make clear, because I want a micro license, that micro licenses were given unlimited by the state because you have to live in the town or bordering town, and you can't make more than $250,000 a year. The whole idea was that so that us small business people who live here, who have paid taxes for over 14 years in this town, has a chance instead of some big corporation coming in and buying up all of the properties and getting all of the business. That is the reason for the micro business. That's why they were unlimited. And I have to remind you that we actually voted in the people that are new here with the things that you want to change now. We voted for you with those changes weren't made then when we just voted new people in. When you guys said that you would have unlimited micro licenses, that was actually the way the state wants it, so that way people like us have a chance. And I don't think you're going to get tons of people getting in and having one on every corner, because it is so expensive and so hard to get in. They're not going to get state licenses, and they're not going to have the money to. If you're a micro license, you can't, it's going to be very few people that can have a micro license. Also, you really, if you're going to look at other towns and see what they did, I think it's only fair that we look at other towns and cities that have had legalized cannabis for many years and find out what has the crime rates gone there? What problems have they had in those other towns? You talk about it being the same as cigarettes and alcohol. I lost my father to cigarettes. I was 7 years old, 43 years old because of cigarettes. There has not been one death ever in history by the use of cannabis alone. So we really need to look at that and say, if alcohol and cigarettes are on the same level, then again, 200 feet away from a liquor store, 200 feet away from kids vaping. This is adult use. 21-year-olds that are adult use are going to buy their cannabis and go home and use it and if they want to use it on the street now, they already are. If you haven't gone to the street fairs and smelled it already, they're already using it. If somebody wants to do that, no law is going to stop them from doing that. But I just want to say that I am a citizen of West Orange. We elected you. We pay taxes here. If you have made an ordinance and made a law for you to just decide because you don't agree with it, that now you're going to change it, I think that's very disappointing for us as citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weinberg. Yes, to the left, and then we'll go over to my right.
Hi, my name is Joanne Asher and I'm at 10 Mellon Avenue. I just want to make 3 points. I feel disrespected as a voter. I read all the campaign literature that each of you sent out. I listened to all of a lot of the discussions, debates before you were elected. Never once was the word cannabis mentioned. I feel duped. Number 2, I feel a lack of respect when you have, excuse me, I don't mean to be impolite, but in my life, I'm sorry, I've never been politically correct. The audacity to say, we changed 100 feet to 200 feet. Oh, please give me a break. And lastly, Verona said no. Roseland said no. Livingston said no. Aren't our children just as precious as Livingston and Roseland and Verona?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Asher. Yes, please come forward.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nordia Gibbs, COO of Pure Natural Vibes LLC. I reside at 206 Tremont Avenue in Orange. I am actually one of the awardees of the township's approval for a micro retail dispensary here in the township. Again, I've read all the versions of the ordinances and I applied under the one that was put out at the time of the application. If there was a pause on the process because you guys needed to think about it some more, I could have understand that. And I could have looked into other township that was neighboring to me. But the application process was open. It was open for micro businesses, unlimited. I'm not really sure what version you read, but it was for standard license at like big operation with no limits and unlimited micro business applications. If you do resend some of the, I guess, awards that you've given out, like how is that process gonna go? Because we are in phase 2 with the state. So there's no turning back. There's no submitting to another township with a conditional. We were approved for West Orange. We submitted under West Orange. We have a location that was perfectly zoned. Parking is no issue, school is no issue, church is no issue. I mean, at this point, the only thing I'm waiting for is for the township to put out phase 2. And I wanted to follow up on that, you know, as my husband's in law enforcement, so we have a vast experience on the security part of the business, the educational aspect with the children. My husband's run his youth program for the past 7 years. We are committed to giving the children education, giving the residents education. Like we've built our business around basically answering any questions anyone has. I've introduced myself to the new council members. They were not a part of the process when we were selected. I've opened my email, phone number, anything you need to look at us as applicants because you weren't a part of that process. We're happy to answer any questions from any resident, we've gotten a few emails already, we've responded. Again, we committed to this township, we've committed to this process. There's literally no going back. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's here. Whether or not the township is selling it, you might as well get the credit for taxes because it's scrolling through. My husband's a police officer, like it's here. So again, we have a very solid plan. And again, we want to host a lot of events before we even get issued a license. So there is literally full transparency with everything that we are about with our business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gibbs. Yes, please come forward, Ms. Morelli.
Rosary Morelli, Ralph Road. I need to tell you that in the 10 decades I've been on this earth, that I would ever be sitting at a meeting like this, talking about our kids taking drugs, having drugs, legalizing drugs. It's going to be part of their lifetime. We all, I'm sure those of us, all of us that have children and grandchildren want to see our children be productive, contribute to society, be the next Thomas Edison. They're not going to do that if their brains are impaired with drugs. I can't wrap my head around it. I'm listening to all of this and it disturbs me. I don't know how you will feel. Wait till you have grandkids. It gets even more, it affects you more. Anyway, I don't know. As I said, I just can't believe it. World wars, bombings, 9/11, all of these historic events. Never did I expect that I would be talking or listening to people talk about drugs. A thing that will impair the brain of our kids. We won't have another Thomas Edison. We can't. These kids will be brain impaired. Drugs, everybody here knows about it, I'm sure, what drugs do to people, what they do to their brains. And yet we're here talking about change the wording here, do this, they'll be 100 feet apart. I don't know. Well, anyhow, the other question, I have a question. The repeal of conflicting ordinances, any ordinances of the township which are in conflict with this ordinance are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict. I think we need an explanation from the legal guys here. I don't understand that.
Thank
Anyway,
you.
that's all I have to say. I'm sure there are other ways. I'm a volunteer certified counselor for 3 years. I worked in Newark after I retired from a 35-year career in the Bell system. Was an advisor and a counselor for small business administration. The very invigorating part of that was all of the immigrants who came for counseling, starting businesses, reminded me of the time when I was growing up I was born during the Great Depression, how there were mom and pop stores, and these people in some cases wound up building their businesses where they became big time. They weren't just a mom and pop store. And I saw this whole evolution or revolution of these immigrants coming in to be counseled to start small businesses. But nobody was talking about selling drugs. No way. I guess this is a moot subject that's going. I hate to see it happen to West Orange. Been here so many years. It's a beautiful town. I fought real hard so I could age in this town. And the only way I'll leave it is in a coffin. Well, no, actually in an urn because I'll be cremated. But I'm disappointed. I'm really disappointed. I'd like for all of you to sit back and think about it, especially those of you who have children. Do you really want this in West Orange? Really? There are so many other ways if you need to generate revenue. There are so many businesses. Think of somebody like Thomas Edison. He's an example for everybody in this township, every parent. Now we're going to sell drugs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morelli. Yes, sir. Your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Al Weinberg. I live on Mount Pleasant Avenue. Anti-inflammatory, analgesic, anti-tumoral. That means it gets rid of tumors. Anti-cancer, antimicrobial. You're wondering, why am I using these words? I see. These are all things that they've found in the cannabis plant that they can extract. Sleep aid, pain relief. Anybody here know anybody uses an awful lot of pharmaceutical drugs for pain relief? Opioids? This is a real problem in our country. There's a way to address a situation with natural means. One thing I'd like to point out, we've been here in West Orange for about 14 years now. And the first thing that struck me about West Orange, the first time I came to the town, was accommodation. I was at the Essex Green with my youngest daughter, and we're in the parking lot, and we're living in Brooklyn at the time. And I noticed people are stopping for each other to walk. They're being accommodating. We're making room for each other. I love that I see on the Sabbath people walking to their house of worship. I love that there's such a variety here. There's so many people. There's so many different needs. There's a little too much fear. That's, I think, the biggest thing that cripples any society. Anybody to suggest that people don't care about their children. I mean, if you have a child, if you don't care about your children, I think that's very strange. And I don't know when it was that I stopped going to the convenience store by the high school because I got tired of kids asking me to buy them beer. Anybody ever have that happen?
Bless you.
Bless you. Thank you. Yeah. I don't like liquor. It's toxic, by the way, which is something that cannabis is not. I understand there's concerns about cannabis. It does have a psychoactive ingredient, improperly used, like anything else. It can be dangerous, not toxic, however, like alcohol, like tobacco. Bless you. These things that actually kill people. The only way to die from cannabis is if a bale falls on you. Not likely. More likely to be struck by lightning or be bitten by a shark. Also, one other thing I'd like to say real quick is that we never had an opportunity to apply for a wholesale license, which hasn't been released yet. Now you're talking about limiting the amount of cannabis entities. In the over a dozen years that I've been here, I've been wondering why we don't have more commerce in this town. I've been watching that. Edison was like my greatest hero as a kid. I was a little disappointed to find out some of his business practices were not so transparent, frankly. I think, the sign, what is it? The home of invention, the future, moving forward, progress. This is where we are right now. This is an opportunity for us, not just and I know right now that's about 2% tax they're offering to the towns and so forth. That's not a whole lot of revenue. Off $1 million, I guess it's a pretty good piece of it. But the thing I think to really be concerned about is the health of our town, creating a healthier environment. If we can switch people from opioids that make them cranky and angry to having a CBD gummy or a THC gummy before they go to bed, so they can get a decent night's sleep and be a nicer part of the community, a nicer neighbor, more helpful, more accommodating. I think that's a really safe bet. I think there's a lot of transparency. There's a lot, the state has already built all these things in, finding out who every person is down to the last detail, making sure every piece of product, extremely diligent about that. They've got that covered. I think it's time to welcome it to the town. And when you say a mile away, that's something you don't want it in the town. The kids walk by that liquor store every day to go to the bagel box. That's not a problem for anybody. Like I said, hasn't anybody ever said, hey, mister, can you buy me some beer? That's not going to happen in front of a cannabis dispensary or any other place. And for that matter, especially in a wholesale business, which would be a very small, discrete business, that hopefully would be able to help the community. And I think most of the people that are looking to get this type of business, any type of cannabis business, we want to give back. We want to try and help. That's really, I think, the biggest thing that we need to look at here. Hey, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Weinberg. Yes, come forward, please. Yes.
Sheila Lefkowitz, Pleasant Valley Way. I want to speak to crime and the rise in crime in Colorado, a state where cannabis was approved and legal. The crime rate in Colorado has increased 11 times faster than the rest of the nation since legislation, with Colorado Bureau of Investigation reporting an 8.3% increase in property crimes and an 18.6% increase in violent crimes. A study funded by the National Institutes of Health showed that the density of marijuana dispensary was linked to increased property crimes in nearby areas. The Boulder Police Department reported a 54% increase in public consumption of marijuana citations since legislation. I'm very concerned about our children, very concerned. You get to do childhood once. Since Colorado, Washington, Alaska, DC allowed for marijuana use, the drug has continued to rise above the national average among youth 12 to 17 in all 4 states and DC. The number of youth arrested for marijuana increased from 2015 to 2016, and the percentage of youth on probation testing positive for marijuana in Colorado has also increased each year since legislation. Despite the claims of pot industry lobbyists that legislation will not affect young adult and youth use, the data show that people are radically increasing their rate of consumption. One recent study showed increased use by 14 to 18-year-olds with newer forms of consumptions, vaping and edibles. Quite frankly, edibles are advertising to children who like gummy bears that this is an okay thing. About 62% of Oregon 11th graders have reported very easy access to marijuana, with many of them reporting marijuana acquisition coming primarily from friends. Additionally, marijuana dispensary density has been linked to more use among youth, with a 16% of 11th graders reporting marijuana use in areas with less dispensary density compared to 23% of the same age group reporting use in more retail dense areas. Another study conducted in Oregon found that as medical marijuana users and growers increased in the community, marijuana use among youth also increased, in part because of social acceptance of the drug. The most recognized survey on the prevalence of drug use in US households is the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. According to NSDUH data, marijuana use in all 4 legalized states and the DC and District of Columbia has continued to increase since legalization. Unfortunately, state studies such as the Healthy Kids Colorado surveys have muddied the waters. This particular study has been rejected by the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, due to its unsound methodology. The study omits some of the largest counties in the state, for example, Jefferson, Douglas, and El Paso, and has a standard of statistical significance set much higher than the average, meaning only differences in use rates far greater than normal are recognized as significant. My concern, July 4th. It's a family holiday. This is what our mayor wants us to do here, right? Mayor McCartney, we're supposed to do things with the family. That was your platform. So I assume you're in support of that. July 4th, how are we going to bring children to the fireworks with pot? And how? Police chief, how are we going to police this? Because that remains a problem, whether it's legal or illegal. So we still haven't solved that problem. We still haven't solved it. I'm at the end of my time. I have so much more to say. But
Thank
I
you,
will
Ms.
be
Lefkowitz.
respectful.
We
Thank you.
appreciate you. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make public comment in the audience? Yes, please, Mr. Jackson.
Good evening, council. James Jackson, 1 Ashley Road, West Orange, New Jersey. Longtime West Orange resident, and one of the approved cannabis license that was given resolution of approval here in town. Longtime resident, you have to excuse me. I'm not as polished as I normally am up here because I'm a little appalled that we're having this conversation today, that we're debating over the number of licenses that were already issued, already agreed to. I respect that there is a new council here in charge. But to go back on something that was already issued is beyond preposterous and not fair. Back to what I was saying, long time, I've worked in the industry for over a decade, cannabis industry for over a decade, provide a good life for my family. I have 3 kids that I raise here in West Orange. Specifically my daughter who has autism and epilepsy. Specifically, Councilwoman, you working with neurodivergent children, right? And understanding that specifically for my daughter, right, children with autism have a lot more propensity to have epilepsy, right? It's a fact. My daughter has epilepsy and is a cannabis patient and has been seizure-free for over 24 months because she consumes cannabis, right? So I'm not getting up here and talking about feelings that a lot of the people are talking about. I'm talking about facts, actual things that have happened in my life, that has changed my life, that have changed my daughter's life. She went from passing out for 5 minutes, turning blue, going completely limp, where I thought I lost her and they almost had to restart her heart in the hospital, to now living a very semi-normal life where she does not have any seizures, right? So I just want you all to think about that. So while we talk about care for our children and caring about our children, and as we introduce cannabis into West Orange, keep in mind the number of children here in town that you all have no understanding of that use cannabis as a medicine. Specifically, you know, we have to improve communication, first off. You have literally 2 approved applicants here in the audience this evening. A number of us that were not aware that this was happening. Changes to an ordinance that is happening at the last minute. Changes since I've seen the last ordinance. Just to be clear, the current ordinance, right? I've heard a number of people say a number of different things. The number of local licenses shall be limited to a combined total number of 4 active local licenses, irrespective, of the categories of licenses cannabis entities, except to any local licenses targeted micro business shall not count towards the total number of licenses pursuant to this section. So to go back and change and now say micro licenses are considered full businesses, you have to delineate between the difference between micros, the difference between full scale, as well as the difference between a cultivator and a retailer, right? I understand the concern around retail. I'm a cultivator. My business is nowhere near where anybody walks, where anybody is. I've done that purposely and carefully. But at the same token, just the fact that we have approved people, now we're talking about rescinding people's licenses. As Ms. Gibbs said, this is not a process that we can unwind. You know, to be 100% frank, I'm far more than $250,000 into this process. I have committed to West Orange. West Orange has committed to me. And now you guys are saying, nah, just playing. Like that, how does that even work? Do you know how difficult it is to raise money for a cannabis business that, to people's point tonight, is federally illegal and there is no institutional funds in the cannabis industry? Specifically as somebody that's a minority, specifically as somebody that's being intentional to keep my license 100% owned, operated, and invested by minorities, right? So the fact that you all have allowed people in the game started, we're up to bat, and you're saying, time out, move the fences back. How do you move the fences back? The game has started, no sport, no competition, no RFP ever run in town. This has never happened before. Cannabis is scaring everybody. It's legal in the state. West Orange was progressive. I give you all credit. I am proud to live in this town. I am proud to raise children in this town. But the fact that you all are playing with my livelihood right now, I cannot take. I do this for my kids. I do this for no other reason. So what I ask is, and I know my time is short and I would ask to finish my statement, Councilwoman Williams, that you guys are fair and equitable in this process, right? This process cannot be unwound. My company has the ability, not only we're going to pay 2% tax, we have committed to paying half a point of our revenue every year to give to West Orange, to put into a fund, to then decide after we put a board, to then you all, the council, to decide where those funds should go, to what community programs. We are not a one-sided business. We care about the town. We live here. Specifically, just to finish up, I know I'm over my time and I apologize.
Mr. Jackson, I appreciate you. I really do.
Right.
But I have to ask you to.
Can I just finish my last sentence?
Your last sentence.
I'll finish my last sentence. What I would say is, I request that you all be fair and equitable in this process. Because what is happening right now and the process of trying to unwind a process that has already been completed is beyond unfair. And for those that have said, the towns that have said no, Verona, Livingston, we are not those towns. We are West Orange. We are progressive. And the joke is on those towns. They are still going to have cannabis delivered to their towns and they're not going to get revenue from that.
Thank you,
I
Mr. Chair.
understand. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate you. I think that will complete. Yes, sir. Come forward. Yes.
My name is Mick Erickson. I'm at 16 Maple Avenue. And I know some of you, I want to say congratulations, Susan and Susan, that's what, right. And she came by my house too, so I want to say congratulations working on this. Some of the complaints, I agree with a lot of them. And I want to also say thank you for the police chief for being involved in this. This is this is something that a lot of the police are adversarial against and not working with the towns on and the legalization. East Orange, somebody said Livingston and Roseland, East Orange and Orange also made it illegal. There's a basketball player that wanted to open up shop in Orange and they said no. I'm just rambling because I'm just taking notes here of what was going on. Some people are talking about traffic, beautiful thing. We should be the cultivation capital of the world, okay? Because cultivation, I started in manufacturing in the 1980s here in West Orange. Okay, and all those manufacturing companies are gone, all of them. These cultivation places fill those old buildings and the space, right? So there's a lot of opportunity and there's no foot traffic like there is on a retail spot. You worry about foot traffic, there's no foot traffic because it's being shipped out to the other places or picked up on in a commercial basis. So I would suggest licensing, limiting licensing, especially micro licenses. That's what we're trying to get away from in this. Because what we did in the state initially, what the state did is they gave licenses to six entities. Those 6 entities now have all sold out to multinational corporations. Okay, and the local people, he's got $250,000 already wrapped up in this. Who's got $250,000 as a small business person to get into this? And to risk it with changes like this, we shouldn't be limiting small businesses. We should be encouraging small businesses. As far as traffic, parking, we shouldn't be after parking. We should be encouraging mass transit. That's why Montclair doesn't have a problem. They're right on Bloomfield Avenue. Buses stop by there every minute. You know, we should be encouraging mass transit and putting that and Uber ahead of parking. Our local people should be able to get involved. And you know, that's really all I have right now. I would like to ask a question of how we could get involved on the Cannabis Commission and how we could get notified. I've asked for notifications before. I've missed all the meetings with COVID and all this stuff. And it seems almost that it's not a very transparent thing happening here in town. And I think transparency is critical, especially in government. So, and I thank you all for taking your time. And I'm glad I stumbled across this. So
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. We appreciate you. Thank you to those who have come out in person to provide public comment. Mr. Fagan, do we have any persons on the Zoom call?
Yes, Council President, we have 24 attendees. Currently, 2 individuals have their hands raised for public comment. Brent Draper Scott, welcome to the meeting. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can. Thank you.
This is Brent Draper Scott at Nestro Road in West Orange. First, I want to say that I support decriminalization of cannabis and medicinal use and recreational use. But I don't want to see West Orange become the dispensary capital of Essex County. Cultivation is a different issue. This is a cash business, and cash business requires 2 types of policing. First is actual policing necessary to protect the cash business. West Orange is a low crime area. Our quality of life is jeopardized if we have to station police near what could become hotspots for cash business robberies. For this reason, I would ask the council to err on the side of fewer rather than more locations. Personally, I don't think more than 2 need to be approved. Second, there is accounting policing. This is again a cash business. To ensure that the town is actually getting its fair share of the money, that's going to require additional staffing to go in and look at the books and help them make sure we get our fair share of the money. To the resident who spoke earlier, stating that we can't regulate where people smoke, I completely disagree with what she said. It took laws, state, local, and federal, to stop people from smoking in public, in front of office buildings and the like. Suggesting that we can't stop people from smoking marijuana in public is a fallacy, and it flies in the face of what has already happened with regards to cigarettes. I agree that 200 feet from a school is not nearly enough. And if people don't think that states can legalize marijuana, or that rather that the federal government won't come in and close it all down, just look at what happened to 50 years of precedent with Roe v. Wade, and before that, with decades of precedent with campaign finance reform laws, both struck down by the Supreme Court. Again, I support decriminalization, medicinal, and recreational use. I encourage this council to be wise and diligent in getting it right for West Orange. We already have 2 that are coming that are appropriately placed. Let's not award any more contracts or letters. Let's see how they do, give them a chance to be competitive and make money, and see how it goes with policing, with customers and such. Finally, to the chair, I think citizen residents should be given an additional 3 minutes time to respond if a member of the council misquotes them or misrepresents what they say after public comment. Last week, a member misquoted or misrepresented what I said. At least a dozen people telephoned or emailed me to ask how she got it so wrong. So again, as a citizen voter, we should be given an additional 3 minutes if we want it. If a member of the council misrepresents or misquotes something we said during public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Anyone else, Mr. Fagan?
Yes, Council President. Cindy Matu Brown, welcome to the meeting. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you so very much. Cindy Matu Brown, former council member and chair of the Cannabis Task Force. I live on Cornwall Circle. Council, I am first and foremost really grateful that Council President had the forethought to have this meeting. I think it's really excellent. I have dealt with Jesus, over at the state, and he's incredibly helpful. Couple of things that I just want to ask, and I'm not sure if you're responding this evening. If you're not, if you can respond in email, that would be great. Any proposed changes that this governing body is going to make, are you grandfathering those applicants who we've already issued letters of support for? Second, if so, I would caution the council that because we have issued letters of support based on the ordinance that we approved, most of you, with the exception of Councilwoman Asmaret Gabriel and Councilwoman Scarpa, we approved an ordinance under which these applicants moved forward with. So I want to know, if we are not grandfathering them, what is your perception on the potential of lawsuits against the municipality? I want to warn you against that. We certainly are not in a fiscal position to be able to absorb any additional lawsuits. The other thing I want to talk about is the task force. When the task force was created, and I have to thank our former mayor Parisi, who had the innovation and forethought to go ahead and understand that this was going to be something that benefited the community, first and foremost, in our revenue generation. We always talk about our taxes. Yes, our taxes are high. This is an economic opportunity for all. Our legal department sat with the mayor, with myself, with our chief of police to be able to create these ordinances. I think that we need to move forward cautiously. When I created the task force, my focus was on diversity and micro businesses, because they allowed our residents, our taxpayers, and those who voted for you, each one of you, to participate and help grow their generational wealth. First and foremost, most micro businesses are approached by women and people of color. We need to make sure that we are not excluding them from this. The other thing I also wanted to correct from Mr. Brent Scott, who just spoke, that this is a cash business. It is not a cash business. You are able to use ATMs or bank credit cards to purchase at these facilities at this time. There are many banks that are now participating in this entity. And the other thing I want to say is that we do allow for I don't know if what is the discussion there, but it is able to use bank cards at these locations. But the other thing I want to say is that I want to remind you all, council members, that in West Orange, we talk about diversity, we tout diversity, we are proud of our diversity. But when we come to this microphone, when we come to this dais and say that the appropriately placed locations, Councilwoman Scarpa, I'm talking to you, the appropriately placed locations, I want you to understand what whitewash is. This is what you just did. Because one of the locations that you said was appropriately placed in the areas that they are down the hill. I'm sure you understand that as an educator, being down the hill versus being up the hill. Hazel Avenue School, there is a location that was approved less than a mile from there. So your interest in not having cannabis dispensaries around schools, is it specific to demographics? Because I'm curious about what appropriately placed means. It doesn't mean appropriately placed in the areas that are down the hill, because all the ones that have been placed and approved, well, supported, not approved, but supported, are down the hill. The one that we want to make sure that we are being equitable to up the hill benefits the municipality because, as one former speaker said before, Verona opted out, Short Hills opted out, all of our neighboring communities on that side opted out. That gives us an opportunity to make sure that we are servicing the residents in that area and in that community. I don't think I have anything else to say, but thank you for the time that you have spent. Councilwoman, this has been very interesting and I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments as well.
Any other members of the public wishing to address the town council, please raise your hand. Last call, members of the public in the Zoom audience wishing to address the council, please raise your hand. Council President, I am seeing none.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. Public comment is now closed. Council colleagues, we will respond to public comment on Tuesday at our regular scheduled.
Absolutely not.
No, that's
Absolutely
not
not.
right.
You've dragged us out here.
Yeah.
We're gonna respond.
I think we should respond. This is terrible. The public hadn't even had a chance to comment until tonight. I mean, and this is all a done deal.
No, I'm supportive of responding to public comment.
Okay. I don't want to respond to public comment this evening, so I will allow my council colleagues to respond. Ms. Castellino, Councilwoman, please. your
Sure.
comments.
Okay, so again, we hear a lot of passion tonight, a lot of emotion. It's been frustrating. I apologize to the chair. I think she's doing a wonderful job this evening, our council president. And I didn't mean to snap at her just now, but again, the public, I know we're getting frustrated, but I have to go back, and this is a conversation I would state last night. People were involved in the pandemic. Parents were worrying about their kids just getting to school, being educated, getting an education, and then having to wear masks when they went back to school. I can't tell you, you may not hear it, but I do all the time on how did this happen? It's like, people were not tuned into us, and we did not do a great job of getting the information out there that they knew where we were going so we could get more public comment sooner. I beg for public comment from people. And I ask them to come to the meetings, and they don't. They just expect us to do their job for them because they vote for us. And they don't want to come to the podium. You're seeing now folks coming to the podium, and I appreciate all of you coming out. I also appreciate the investors because it's been hard on them because it's the way, we're only good as the information we have on the night that we have our votes. And it's tough. I've been doing this for a long time, and this is the toughest topic we had to deal with. And mainly, again, I'm going to blame it from the top with the state, the way this rolled it out. They rolled it out and threw it at us. The investors, I feel bad, Ms. Gibbs. I didn't vote for yours, not because I think you're going to be a great investor in our community. And kudos to you. You're the only retailer who's not selling vaping products. So, and I wish I could have voted for you, but I felt we had too many by the time you came to us. And that's a shame because I think you're going to do a nice job. You give the opportunity. Mr. Jackson, I mean, you educated me with the medicinal use, and that's wonderful. But talking to the gentleman from the state, and all you recreational facilities need to be really, really careful promoting the medicinal use of these products because you're not supposed to be. And again, we had a whole conversation because, licensed pharmacists aren't, dispensing. Sorry, I have Invisalign that I'm still struggling with, so I don't speak properly all the time. So if it sounds like my tongue is tied, it really is. So I apologize. I'm getting used to it. But so that's been an issue because we're touting to seniors and seniors, you need to be careful. Like, yes, there's benefits, but you need to talk to your doctors and you need to talk to your pharmacists because like any other drug, it's a drug. Just like if you take too much alcohol with the product, folks, you have to educate yourselves with all this. So there's just so much, and I could be here all night talking about everything I learned. And for those folks, out there, I mean, Sheila, you've been great. You've been sending information. I've been reading it all. for the past couple years, talking to folks in other towns, when I go to these conferences, these national conferences, talking to people from other states, always asking, always seeking information. And I could tell you the benefits, and I could tell you there's a lot of issues that come along with anything else, and it's going to be growing pains for us. But at the end of the day, we have to be responsible to work we've done. And I appreciate all the comments, but there is cash involved. And my former colleague, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming on the air this evening. But again, we had an event. I know in the task force, I was on the task force when investors came and we interviewed them. I always let them know there are going to be amendments coming. I always wanted at least 200 feet from a school. So folks always knew about that in advance. So to the investors, it should not be a surprise. I was always forthcoming and sharing how I felt about this. I did not vote for this to be legalized in New Jersey, and I'm working through it, and it's here. And Ms. Morelli, your comment with how you feel about things, and I always appreciate that too. I wish we spent more time on talking about Restaurant Week and supporting a lot of other businesses here in the township, but this is here and we have to deal with it and we have to get it right. So with all that being said, we'll look at the changes. I have to talk to legal. I know what the town, what the council approved, and we have to figure out responsibility with it. But again, going back to the gentleman from the state last night, we're not committed. So again, there has to be talk with legal. Smells another thing, we got to deal with, see how that comes to be. I'm not saying, and the folks that talk about micro businesses, and it's and I appreciate you coming forward tonight as well. But, I'm of the mindset, I like to see one of these, establishments open and see, we don't know what we don't know. And, is it fear? Is it cautiousness? And to move forward. So, is 7 stores working for Bloomfield? Not from everybody from Bloomfield that I talk to, it's not. But for some it does. So we're going to have to see what's going to work here and what doesn't work here. And right now, we're going to be cautious about it, or I am at least. And I think we all are taking the time and being thoughtful. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you to my colleagues for putting in the extra time, and hopefully, we're going to get it right.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Gabriel Michael, please.
These businesses applied and received letters of support from us based on the original ordinance. They are far along in the process. It is wrong now to go and say that we're going to revoke several of them because we're going to go down to 4. I am in disagreement to that. We should at least grandfather those businesses all. They may not even all get licenses. They still have to go through the state, and they have to come back and apply through us. I mean, what kind of business practices are we showing as a township? What's happening here is wrong. I'm in disagreement. They should be grandfathered in. Let's see what happens with the process. Let's see who even gets their license. Let's see who gets approved by us. And then we can go ahead and change it after they're in there. To change it now, I'm in complete disagreement. I think it's wrong. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, for expressing your concerns. We can, we did in a very, I believe you guys did in a very respectful way. We're going to have differencing of opinions, but we should express ourselves respectfully. But to me, I don't think it's right, what's happening to the businesses. So that's where I stand on things.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gabriel Michael. Councilman Rutherford.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you to all of you that have expressed yourselves tonight. I think I am very encouraged by this conversation. We are dealing with a new industry where the rules are being written as we speak. We get new guidance from the state from time to time. I expect we will continue to get new guidance from the state. The original ordinance that we voted on and approved had some language that was inconsistent with the state initially with regard to how we control public smoking. We received guidance from the state that said you can't treat cannabis smoking any different than tobacco smoking. So we then changed the ordinance. I advocated initially for houses of worship to be included in the exclusionary zones. I did not have support for that. I didn't have enough support for that. So that wasn't able to be done then. It is able to be done now, and I'm grateful for the support of this council in that regard. So we had to update the ordinance. We are going to make additional changes. As time goes on, we're going to learn more information. We're going to see what the actual experience is, and we'll take that into consideration as we try to govern this new business. Now that process is going to be painful. And I have been very critical of the task force, the level of communication that came from the task force in specific instances, and Ms. Gibbs is one of them. And I did vote for yours. I did support yours, and I think your space is great. I think our focus on minority and women-owned businesses is the right place to put the focus. I think supporting veterans and current law enforcement is something that we should do in this industry, especially given the stigma around it. And West Orange says we are a stigma-free town, but we're really not. We're certainly not when it comes to cannabis. So just want to say a couple of things about the comments that were made. And I want to thank each of you for doing. I'm going to treat this public comment the same way I do traditional council meetings. Mr. Dowd, I do want to thank you. He's no longer here if you're watching this later. I hear your concerns loud and clear. He, I believe, is a great example of not in my own backyard. People supported cannabis when we had the opportunity to vote it up or down a few years ago. And then now we're seeing what the experience is, and some people are expressing some concerns about that. And rightfully so, I completely understand. And we have to make room for those that feel that way. Ms. Hersey, I hear you loud and clear as well. I don't think we can, at least I would not be supportive of excluding micros altogether. Because I do think we need to provide an opportunity for regular everyday folks, certainly people that live in West Orange. This is going to be a moneymaker. And we absolutely want our own residents to participate in that. If we're going to allow it, they should have an opportunity, and that's the easiest way for them to do it. But to your point, perhaps we should consider separate caps depending upon the type of license. We've talked about dispensaries differently than we've talked about cultivation. We've talked about consumption lounges differently than we've talked about dispensaries. There are delivery licenses. There are the transportation license, I believe. There are all these different. So maybe we should consider caps based on the type of license. And that's something I'm happy to have a conversation with my colleagues about. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is make sure we create a space where everybody can be successful and people understand what the rules of the road are. Now, I have to give a caveat there. We don't know the rules of the road. It's being written as we speak. So there are going to be some changes that we just can't get around. But we will do, I think this council is committed to doing our very best to make sure that we communicate those changes as quickly as possible. With regard to the federal drug-free zone around schools being at 1,000 feet, that is still in effect. It does not include cannabis because cannabis is no longer, was it Schedule I drug, Schedule whatever it is, it's not a drug anymore. It's not, it's.
I'm sorry. Can we please have order in the room? My councilman is speaking.
In New Jersey, it's no longer an illicit drug. It is at the federal level. Now, the federal, as far as I understand, they're going to step on the state's toes with regard to cannabis, and I do expect that sometime it will be legal federally also. But because it is no longer a Schedule C, that's what it is, right? Is it Schedule C, attorneys? Schedule 1, it's no longer a Schedule 1 drug in New Jersey and in all the states that have made it legal for adult recreational use. And that allows us to not have to abide by this 1,000 feet around a school. Now, that doesn't mean it's not the right level, doesn't mean it's not the right distance. And that's a discussion that we can have. I'm glad that we got it to 200 feet. It was hard enough to even get 200 feet initially. We had all kind of pushback on 200 feet and had to settle for 100 feet. So, you know, we're making progress there. To Al and Paula Weinberg, I've got you guys in different spaces on my notes. So you are the first. I said earlier today, I have not received any commentary from the public saying they wanted more. You are the first, and I applaud you for that. Thank you for sharing your sentiments here. I do think we should support small business. I think we have to do it with the balance, the overall needs of the community at the same time. And I understand that your desire in that space is a little different than a dispensary. But that's why we may need to revisit the caps based on the type of license. And I think that's at least worthy of a conversation. I'm sorry, Ms. Asher, that you feel disrespected. That is certainly not my intent. I don't believe it's the intent of anyone up here to make you feel that way. The job that we're doing is very difficult. Councilwoman Castellino said it very well. We've been put in a very tough spot because we are given certain guidance, the guidance changes, or we go to create our own ordinance, and there are spaces that aren't really covered by the guidance that we've gotten from the state. And then we have to balance those that are supportive and those that aren't, or those that are supportive for decriminalization, but not legalization, those that are supportive of legalization, but not in West Orange. So there are competing interests here that we have to balance as we try to figure out the right way to proceed. Ms. Gibbs, your comment about how would the process work if we rescind the licenses? I don't know, and that's a very good question. I'm sure it's something that we'll have to have some further commentary on or discussion if that is the direction we go in. I want to reiterate a point that was stressed to me in trying to secure or to explain why I should be supportive or not supportive, what the pros and the cons were when we made these votes initially. It was stressed to me in public comment, in public meetings, it's a matter of public record on multiple occasions, that giving a letter of resolution of support does not guarantee a license. It was said in this council chamber, and it was told to me, it may or may not be true, I don't know. It was told to me that that was also communicated in writing from the task force to the applicants. So what we're considering doing is not crazy. Now, I understand, Mr. Jackson, your position, you've made an investment. I get it. I would certainly hate to make an investment of that scale and find the rules being changed. But unfortunately, that's the industry that we're in. This is brand new in New Jersey, and the rules are going to continue to change. Now, how we do that can be fair and equitable. How we communicate around that, how we listen to the business community, the voices that are invited and included in those discussions can be fair and equitable. And you're absolutely right, it should be. But it is, I'll give you an example. We were told that we could not regulate micro businesses in town. That was said directly to me, which eliminated, from my perspective, any opportunity to change the number of micros we could have. Now, that turns out not to be true. It's the state is not limiting the number of micros, but they've not precluded us from limiting the number of micros in our town. Now, and I don't know if that's a change over the course of time, but that is, we discussed that, I believe, last night in our meeting with the CRC. So we can actually limit the number of micros in town, which is new news to me. Prior to recently, I did not know that we could do that, which is why I agreed to the 4, because I thought we couldn't agree I thought we couldn't do anything about micros. Okay, Ms. Lefkowitz, you've clearly done your homework, and I certainly do appreciate all of your outreach, the conversation. Same thing with you, Ms. Morelli. You've been steadfast in your position, and I welcome that. And I think everybody needs to hear that as well. We don't want an echo chamber. And at the end of the day, we have to be held accountable. We're going to be held accountable by everybody, people that support it and people that don't. So your voice and your data in particular are very well appreciated. Mr. Mick, I didn't get your last name. Erickson, thank you, sir. I do want to thank you as well. You know, you said we should be the cultivation capital. I don't know if we should or shouldn't, but I do know that that's a different business environment, business culture. It has a different impact on the neighborhoods than dispensaries. Now, I've supported recreational adult use cannabis from the very beginning. I've supported it in clergy circles. I've gone to countless meetings. I've supported it, trying to convince senior citizens not to vote against it, trying to help educate them. But in that process, you have to understand where people are, and you have to try and move them somewhere else. Now, there are two ways you can do it. You can grab them by the collar and drag them, or you can wrap your arm around them, have a conversation, and try and persuade them. My approach has been to persuade. I think we need to talk about what cannabis really is. I mean, Ms. Morelli, I respect you tremendously. To lump cannabis in with these other drugs like, cocaine and heroin in particular, and even alcohol, is unfair to cannabis. It is not like them at all. It does not have the same side effects. It does not affect the body the same way. It doesn't affect the mind the same way. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have an effect. It absolutely does have an effect. But I help people I have to meet someone at 9 o'clock in the morning to help them get into a alcohol detox facility. That's one of the hardest substances to kick, is alcohol. And for alcoholics, they can die if they don't get off of alcohol under the supervision of a doctor. That does not happen with cannabis. So we've had decades worth of misinformation fed to the public to support a certain agenda with regard to cannabis. Part of that agenda was to lock up Black and brown people. Let's be very clear. The communities that have been hurt the most are poor, Black, and Hispanic, and immigrant, by cannabis laws. What we're trying to do now is undo some of those decades worth of damage. Now, we still have to be considerate and cautious, as some have mentioned, but I do think it's important that we understand the history of how we got here and the role that misinformation played. There are a lot of people that believe things about cannabis that just are not true. Mr. Scott, I wanted Mr. Moon to comment on this because we talked about this last night. If you go into New York City at any time of day or night, you are going to smell people smoking cannabis. That is just a reality. If you walk by a construction site, you're going to smell it. And there's apparently nothing that New York can do about it. And what I wanted to know in our meeting was, what could we do about it ourselves to keep people from just walking down Main Street smoking cannabis, pretty much anywhere they wanted to. And and rather than give the answer, Mr. Moon, can you just remark on what we can do?
Not at this time. Let us finish our public comment and then we can come.
I mean, during regular public comment, we frequently hear from the attorneys or Mr. Grace.
But I would like us to finish and then he can address it, because that's not appropriate for Mr. Moon. That's appropriate for the chief.
Mr. Moon answered it last night. So then I'll give my answer then. There's nothing that we can do to stop people from smoking along the Main Street or any of these other sidewalks. Mr. Moon, you can come when Council President allows you to. But there's nothing that we can do to police that. Come back to that policing thing in a second. Is it right? That's just a reality. Whether it's right or wrong is actually irrelevant. It's what we have the power to do. You know, we can enforce smoking in public parks, in town hall, but we can't do it in private businesses or on the street. And we'll have to figure out what the right way to approach the culture of consuming cannabis in town is. But whatever we do will have to be consistent with state law. We have to abide by those guidelines. Ms. Matute Brown, I find it ironic, two comments for you. I find it ironic that you would even bring up the potential for lawsuits. You are the former chair of the Cannabis Task Force, and we have had more, at least from my perspective, we've been exposed to issues that could create legal challenges for us as a result of that. So I think it's kind of ironic that you would caution us and speak so sternly, given a lot of the reason why we're dealing with stuff right now is because of you. And then to criticize Councilwoman Scarpa, to say what she's doing is whitewashing by commenting on what's appropriately placed. She mentioned two. One is on Prospect Avenue and one was, as you would say, down the hill. I don't see how that's being whitewashed. And I think it would be good for you, Ms. Matute Brown, to abide by your own commentary when you sat in this seat and asked residents to be respectful of council members when they addressed us. This doesn't have to be contentious. We don't have to fight. Now, we do have to debate. We're not going to agree on everything. And in the debate, I think if we listen to everybody, we'll get a better outcome. It's hard to listen when people are being disrespectful. And so, you know, to support Councilwoman Scarpa, I wanted to just give that commentary. Now, I do believe I've addressed every single person that gave public comment. If I've missed someone, please send me a note and I will respond in writing.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Scarpa.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councilman Rutherford. I was very taken aback by that comment. What I had said was I felt that the cannabis entities should be a mile from any school, whether it be up the hill, down the hill. I work at Washington School. It's a school where children all walk to school every day on our sidewalks with their families. And I am concerned that they are going to have to walk very soon to school and smell cannabis on the sidewalks, and that their parents are going to be put into a position of having to talk to them about what that funny smell is in those little brown cigarettes or whatever. So the reason I liked those two very locations are because they are a mile from the school and they're not on the sidewalks where our children walk. And in addition, I love the Gibbs family. I love that we have a veteran. I love that he's in law enforcement. I love the fact that he's interested in our community. And I couldn't think of anyone I would rather support than that family to have a cannabis entity, and look forward to working with them. Now, just to start, you know, I want everyone to realize that I'm not talking from my own point of view. From days before I was sworn in with the oath, I was getting calls from residents all over the place as they've begun to learn about the cannabis business that we have here. None of the residents, as Councilwoman Castellino has said, half the people in town don't even know about this. And as every PTA mom begins to learn about it, they are saying to me, why are we having these all over our town? Everyone that I've been talking to has said, I am okay with cannabis decriminalization. Many people said, I even voted for it. Many understand the medicinal purposes. I think it's wonderful that you're able to use cannabis with your daughter, and I'm sure it's very effective. I had dinner meeting with a pharmacist just the other night to learn about the effect of cannabis on the body, how it's used medicinally, and how it's used recreationally, and some of the hazards of that as well. Particularly if we're going to be encouraging cannabis use for pain management, especially with our elder population. Many of them are on many drugs, statins, heart medicine. We don't even begin to understand the drug interactions of cannabis on these prescription drugs. So in my ideal world, there'd be maybe 1 or 2 retail stores with licensed pharmacists running them that would serve both medicinal and recreational use. But that's not, my world is not the world. So I'm in the world we are today and trying to figure it all out. So I want to say to Mr. Dowd, the smoking on the sidewalks was something that I really would like to talk about, because Councilwoman Castellino and I were on the call with the state representative the other night, and I asked that very question. How are we going to police this? That many of the people that I know that have concerns don't have concerns with adults using cannabis recreationally in their own homes. Their concern is that it's on the sidewalks where their children walk to school, to church, to synagogues. And they don't want that for their children. They want their children to learn to problem solve in a tough world and not check out on drugs. And it is a drug. So that's where I'm coming from. I believe in your own home, everyone can do whatever they want and recreate, whether it's recreational, medicinal, whatever. So to Mr. Dowd, on the sidewalks, we cannot police it. We asked the representative, and he said that legally, because cigarettes smoking is allowed on public sidewalks, you could walk down the street and smoke cigarettes. We have got to allow cannabis to be smoked or whatever on public streets. So that's, I think, if we get to what the real meat of this is, that is where the moms and the dads and the grandmoms and everybody has a real problem. The message that we're giving to our children. We're normalizing cannabis use and giving our kids the impression that it's a viable form of recreation. Because, you know, we all lead by example, right? As a mother, as a teacher, as a speech therapist, an allied medical professional, we can't tell our children, don't do this, don't smoke, and then have them seeing it all over our home and all over our streets. So this is the dilemma that I think we find ourselves in. So to Mr. Dowd, I see the same problem. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot we could do about it. I do agree that any establishment that serves minors or anyone under 21 should automatically have the license revoked. That's a problem, and I would agree with him there. Mrs. Hershey, you made some great points. Thank you. It is wonderful to have someone with your legal expertise to help us sift through all this, because you can imagine it's incredibly difficult. And I really want to thank you for helping everyone, our administration, understand how difficult this is for those of us who aren't lawyers, particularly when we don't get a red line copy. And things are slipped, you know, under our face like the day we get it. I've spent, I don't know how many hours going back and researching ordinances to try to sift through all this paper. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Mrs. Weinberg, I understand your interest. Unfortunately, the constituents that I have really would like to see this capped at 4. They don't want West Orange to be the cannabis capital of Essex County. And I have to agree with them. For the sake of our children, you know, I think this should be available for those adults who want it and need it. but I don't think it's something that we should rubber stamp or put the good housekeeping seal on. Ms. Asher, thank you very much. I could understand how you would be feel disrespected because you, like most of our township, had no idea this was going on. And I think that's where the problem lies. I think there should be a public forum still with, I think the PTAs and the Board of Education should talk to the public about how we're going to responsibly promote cannabis businesses in our town. And I'd like to see a presentation from a pharmacist or other medical professionals. I'd be happy to coordinate it, to explain to parents and all of us the medical effect of cannabis on the body and on a developing brain. Because from what I've been reading, a lot of our kids, as we've heard, are engaging in smoking pot at school. Some people have told me 30%. The statistics are from about the age of 15 to 25, we know that our brain development is at its best, particularly the frontal lobe of the brain. And if all of our high school kids are smoking more cannabis than ever, I'm concerned about the effect on a developing brain. And I think a lot of medical professionals are too, particularly from my readings and my interactions with many medical professionals who share the same concerns. So I think parents and young teenagers, high school kids, need to understand what they are actually doing to their body. Let's see here. Mr. Gibbs, I think I referenced you. I think it's wonderful that Mr. Jackson, I think it's wonderful that it's working for your daughter. And I hope that we will have a cannabis business here in town that can really serve the needs of those who need cannabis medicinally. And as I said, I'd like to see some medical professionals weigh in. Mrs. Morelli, I completely understand how you feel. This is something that all of us are just learning about and wrapping our arms around. And I think we need to respect the feelings and the opinions of everyone of every age in this township. And there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had, factual conversation around this issue. Let me see. I think I've gotten almost everyone here. Yeah, I think I've gotten everyone. If I didn't, please email me. I'm very open to having a conversation about this with everyone and anyone.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you to the public for coming out this evening. I want to thank especially our legal team, our business administrator, our clerk of court, and my council colleagues, and the chief of police and the mayor for coming out and giving me an opportunity to engage my council colleagues in questions that they may have surrounding cannabis and how it is going to look in West Orange. So with no further ado.
Sorry. Sorry, not to belabor this meeting, but
we are.
well, we are. Like I said, we got to hammer it out. I apologize. Okay, so we had a conversation on enforcement because this is the issue that we're hearing with enforcement. So with that, we have two things. We know we can't enforce it on the streets. So you're gonna, before we wrap up, you're gonna look into how we could manage the special events in the township when they're held on the street. So you're gonna figure that one out?
Yeah, I think that, that we will be able to handle that with the special event permits. So special event permits basically gives people permission to do things on public property. And part of that process is evaluating what they're doing, what costs there are to us, and also what conditions we might give them approval on, based on. So as long as legal signs off on it.
It's neutral. It's smoking. Okay?
Yeah.
It's not gonna be smoking cannabis versus smoking tobacco.
No, we don't want smoking.
All-
We don't want any smoking at these events.
Right.
Neutral.
So that would be a condition of the issuance of a permit.
Okay.
I have a question while we're on enforcement, because in our meeting last night, we mentioned enforcement in public spaces like parks, schools, outside of schools, in municipal buildings. You said that you would look into enforcement. I mean, I have an issue that we're not enforcing it now, to be honest, because when I go to the parks, I
Mhm.
see people smoking, I can smell it. There's kids, there's practices. We live in a huge sports community. It's everything, yes, correct, but we're not enforcing it now. And I think that we should be. Whether it may not be from our police, we spoke that maybe it could be zoning or health department or.
Again,
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we just make that, can we make enforcement and then a topic? And Chief, can you come back to us at our next scheduled meeting on February 7th? And at least give us what the parameters are on cannabis enforcement so that there's clarity. Or smoking, whatever it is, but at this. Can you please just use it, Mike? Thank you.
So when this topic's discussed, I try to encourage people to keep it simple.
Yeah.
If you can't smoke tobacco products, can't smoke cannabis. If you can smoke tobacco products, you can smoke cannabis. So.
Correct, but
It's that simple.
So,
Now-
okay,
Hold on.
second.
Now, in the event of a special event, if you totally restrict any type of smoking, yes, you could also not allow cannabis.
Okay,
Still in line with what I've said.
thank you.
It's really that easy.
Councilwoman, do you have any additional questions?
Thank you, Council President. My question is, doesn't pertain to special events. I'm talking about everyday, regular, you're going to the park, walking,
So-
again, sports community, people use our parks, quality of life. What are we going to do about the people who are smoking in our parks and public places? It should be enforced.
So I don't disagree with you, but to my way of thinking, that's a health issue.
Okay.
The reason you can't smoke in public spaces like that is because of health, not
Okay.
because of it's a crime. I think it's better enforced from somebody other than the police, because as Councilman Rutherford touched on, we've had a bad experience in this country with the police and marijuana enforcement. And, in New Jersey, as I point out to people often too, that, the statewide narcotic action plan, the SNAP, required police to make arrests with any marijuana offenses. So there was no discretion. So police officer didn't have the right to take a joint and throw it down the sewer and say, don't do this again. It's a different world today, but that's how it was when all these arrests were being made. Police officer could have lost his job for not doing that.
And I understand that, Chief. What I'm referencing again in our meeting last night was it wouldn't be through the police department. And that's why I was speaking to Mark Moon. You guys said it could possibly be zoning or the health department or a different department.
Okay.
Or parks even, or even parks.
But I guess, Councilwoman, again, let's do this sui generis from
Yes.
this law and the ordinance that
Okay.
we need to, as fine tune. I hear you loud and clear. What I'd like to do, consistent with what you said about neighboring towns and other towns and parks around the state, is I'd like to do some investigation as to how they do this in a, we'll call it content neutral.
Yeah.
Fair, educational, health wise. Again, there are many people who go to sporting events who like to take a stogie because they can't smoke a cigar in their house and they light up. That's offensive to people like me who don't like secondhand smoke, right? It's got nothing to do with content. So I guess I feel like if we do this deliberately, and obviously I'd love to have because you're health oriented in your profession, maybe we can come up with some good strategies. Never gonna be perfect. And again, we've all been in sporting events where people light up tobacco and cigars and it annoys you and I, but we try not to offend them. We ask them if they can move away and whatnot. So I think it's educational, health wise. I respect, and I think we have to respect the chief that the decision has been, we are not going to have police doing this. That's not the administration's position, but there are strategies.
And I understand that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Yes, Councilwoman.
Can't we have an ordinance that there's no smoking on public parks?
We
and
have it.
schools?
We have one.
But even at the school, so at schools, secondhand smoke is
I,
secondhand
we
smoke.
passed
So,
policy.
yeah.
It's there. That's up to the school districts.
So we
All right.
can't get the school district to go along with it?
No, it's passed. I was there.
Oh,
Yeah,
so they can't.
It's already there.
So again, it's already there.
it's
Policy's there. Policy is there.
So people will smoke anyway, and so what we're talking about is enforcement. Chief, when you do your, or legal team as well, when you do your investigative work on how to approach, managing this, I'll say, not policing it, it's going to require some level of a budget. So please let us know what the financial impact is going to be able to properly, manage smoking in public parks and public spaces within town. What number of people would be needed. We know that they're not coming from the police, but we still need to know what the budgetary impact is going to be.
And you're absolutely right, and that's why I want to hook in before we come back. That's why I appreciate it, Council President, if we take it to February 7th, because I want to get Director Francine involved.
Okay,
Because
that's fine. Thank you.
maybe there's students and people at universities and schools who would be less of a financial burden, who could help us deliver the message in a content neutral manner.
Thank you, Mr. Trent. Councilwoman Castellino.
Thank you, Council President. So I'm sitting here jumping out of my seat because our recreation director and Mr. Gross, you should jump out of your seat too. He put a plan together last year for the parks, and the chief also, to have someone go around to the parks to make sure, because again, we had this isn't a new issue with the smoking.
Fireworks.
We had, drinking, I mean, gambling. So there's been, things happening in our parks time to time that we have to be on top of. So, and also even breaking curfew at the parks, past 10 o'clock. So I know, the recreation director did have something in place, and I'm sure the mayor's right there. She's right there. So hopefully
think
she
it's-
could revisit that and see if we could afford it.
I think that, I didn't speak up previously. It's not to say that we don't have any enforcement activity going on. We do. But in the scope of our resources, it is not, certainly not sufficient enough to make a major dent into it. The recreation department, we now have, individuals who are assigned to the parks, and they go through, and if someone is smoking that they run across, they give them a little card, say, you're not allowed to smoke in the park, and most people comply at that point in
Yeah.
time, and they go on. So there is some level of enforcement. Having said that, I can't tell you that the level of concern that you're showing about it, that the enforcement that we're doing is matching that. It's not. And so I think town council indicated that they want to do some research for what other towns are doing. And I think what we want to do is we want to come back to you and explain to you what enforcement looks like, what it would look like. And so you can make an educated decision about that, both effectively what it looks like and financially what it looks like.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. Appreciate you. Thank you, Chief. We appreciate you as well. Again, I appreciate everyone coming out.
One more thing before we go. The smoking on the street issue has been addressed. We talked about this last night in our meeting as well. Someone brought up revoking licenses of bad actors. Just want to be clear that based on the information that was shared with us last night, there's no way to do that quickly. It will still involve some due process, and if you'd like to elaborate, you can. It's not that we don't want to or won't. It's that there are some rules regarding how we would go about addressing bad actors in that space.
I'd like to.
And
just-
so I would like to just request that while that is germane to the conversation, it's not germane to the ordinance here tonight that's on the topic. And so that question can be answered at a.
I disagree, Council President. Yeah, I think folks are not really just confined by this, but we're talking about cannabis, and I think the public wants to know about those things, so.
Understanding that, but we also have given notice to our discussion on cannabis and the ordinance. So I just think we're getting off topic.
I think
going
we're very
into
on
some-
topic. I think this is.
I agree that I
And it should have been fixed by now.
I understand.
So again, very brief, there is no process set forth in the law. Again, it goes back to what we took about, due process and not being arbitrary and capricious. So again, we don't know, it's like any new enterprise. We don't know the issues. We have some experience as to liquor establishments. And our police department does the best job they can and comes before you when there is an infraction and you hear it. You deliberate in due course and you decide what's appropriate. We've had liquor establishments, as we know, that have had fights and we suspend their license for a period of time. God forbid, we ever had some calamity, not in the 25 years I've been town attorney, have we ever tried to revoke a license. We've put restrictions on it and we've treated it appropriately. Keep in mind. So the short answer is, what's so important about it, a new industry like this is regulated. And especially when you hear some of the testimony tonight, they have such investment and this is unique with the security plans. Again, so the chiefs look at security, no security plan is perfect. Anything can happen here or anywhere else across the country. So all I can say is everybody knows their eyes are going to be on this industry. And certainly we have no better people than the people who are the professionals in this town. So we can continue to talk about it, but I think the most important thing is inspections, licenses, education, all the things we're talking about.
Thank you, Chief.
Counselor, if I'm not mistaken, they also have to renew the license every year.
Absolutely. I thought we have that. So yeah,
Right.
you'll get to look at them.
Yeah, so, worst case scenario, 364 days that you'd have to put up with a bad actor before you don't renew.
Well, and the chiefs made an excellent proposal that I'm gonna start to look at. So as we know, some of the issues we've dealt with in town, for instance, some of the issues with our recycling center. We made a decision a number of years ago, probably now goes back almost 20, but probably somebody else in this room, probably the mayor remembers that when we were having issues at our recycling center, we went out and found a person who teaches recycling at Rutgers University and was a member of the BPU, Wayne DeFeo, who is what we call our environmental compliance officer. He basically, it's $500 a month. He makes 2 surprise visits at our recycling center. And if there's any complaints, as you know, from time to time, there's odor and other issues, he goes there and he writes up by email through Ms. Carnival, pictures and a written report that he gives us once a month. Where we don't even wait for the DEP. We don't want to wait for the DEP because then they start licensing and finding and whatnot. So that is our recycling center. We think it's run better than ever. Not perfect, and anything can happen anywhere. But the chief's recommendation, because this is a new area, is that we look to a professional like that, whose job, and it'll be funded through the licensure fees and the renewal fees, that he or she will have a similar role. They will understand this industry, how it should run. They will make surprise visits. Certainly, if there's any complaint, they will be our eyes and ears. And so, again, I want to get a template as to what that is. I will likely suggest, and if the mayor agrees, that we put out an RFP for that, and that we try to get that person. That way, we're ahead of the curve, and hopefully, we never have any issues. And then it's a moon issue. But I think the chief's recommendation is sound. Because we're all worried and don't even know half of what we don't know. So
The only other thing I'd like to say in closing is that I've spoken extensively with Director DeMayo in Bloomfield, Chief Todd Conforti in Montclair, and the late Chief Jimmy Duvall, rest his soul, from Maplewood. All 3 of them tell me unanimously, hands down, there are none of these issues everybody's concerned with. They said they're probably the quietest business they have in town. That you wouldn't even know they're there. So, I mean, I can only tell you about 3 police law enforcement executives that have these in their towns, and this is what they're telling me. Maybe when it first opens, they get a big rush because people want to see it. They've never been in one. They're going to show up there. But, within a week that settles down. Bloomfield had a little traffic issue. They rerouted the traffic. They said they solved that. And the store was actually willing to hire off-duty police officers to direct traffic. They said it really wasn't even necessary after about a week, just kind of settled down. So I know there's a lot of concern here, and I'm not saying it's bad to have that concern, but I think that you're not going to see the things that you're worried about. I don't think they're going to materialize.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Now, without any further ado, if there are no more questions, may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Yes.
Is
I motion to adjourn this
Is
meeting.
there a second? Yes, meeting adjourned, 9:29. Thank you, everyone. Good night. We're